The silence in the room was deafening. Keanu Reeves sat alone in the dimly lit living room of his home, his eyes fixed on an old photo album resting on the coffee table. The worn leather cover of the album seemed to hold a world of memories, memories of a life that had been both extraordinary and, at times, painfully fleeting. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? He flipped through the pages slowly, each photograph telling a story, each image a snapshot of a life lived under the public eye. There were pictures of him with his beloved partner Jennifer, their smiles wide and carefree, capturing the essence of love before it was so tragically cut short. There were images of his younger self, a man full of ambition and hope, looking out at the world with a spark in his eyes that felt distant now. And there, nestled at the very end of the album, was a photo of him holding his daughter, Lily, a moment of pure joy frozen in time. Lily. His heart swelled with both love and sorrow as he stared at the photograph. She had grown so much since that picture was taken. His little girl, now a young woman, was everything to him. His reason for pushing forward every day, even in the face of unimaginable loss. The thought of leaving her behind was unbearable, yet here he was, at the precipice of something he couldn't change. Keanu's fingers trembled as he closed the album. His chest tightened, and a familiar ache gnawed at him. He couldn't run from it anymore. The doctors had given him the grim diagnosis. His time was running out, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The words echoed in his mind as he thought about the question that had popped up in the live stream he had been watching earlier that morning. What had pushed him forward all these years? It had always been love. His love for Jennifer, his love for his friends, and most importantly, his love for Lily. But now, as he sat there in the quiet of his home, a thought crept into his mind. How could he leave his daughter when she still needed him? A sigh escaped his lips, and he glanced out the window at the setting sun. It was a perfect evening, peaceful and serene. And yet, he felt a storm brewing within him. Time was cruel. It had already taken so much from him, and now, it was taking the one thing he cherished most, the ability to be there for Lily in the way she deserved. Keanu closed his eyes for a moment, trying to steady his breathing. He couldn't afford to fall apart. Not now. He had to be strong. For Lily. The door creaked open behind him, and he didn't have to turn around to know who it was. A soft voice, full of warmth and love, called his name. Dad? Keanu smiled softly and turned to see his daughter, Lily, standing in the doorway. She had inherited so much of Jennifer's beauty, but it was her kindness, her quiet strength, that reminded him most of the woman he had lost. Hey, sweetie, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Lily stepped into the room, her eyes scanning the space before resting on him. Are you okay? She asked, her gaze searching his face for any sign of the pain he was hiding. Keanu nodded, though he knew she could see through him. Lily had always been able to do that. She knew him better than anyone. I'm fine, he lied, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Lily walked over to him, sitting down beside him on the couch. You've been staring at that album for a while, she said gently. Anything you want to talk about? He shook his head, the weight of the moment settling in. How could he tell her the truth? How could he tell her that everything was about to change, that his time with her was running out? Instead, he simply reached over and took her hand. I've been thinking, he said softly, about how lucky I am to have you in my life. Lily's eyes softened, her fingers tightening around his. I'm lucky to have you too, Dad, she replied quietly. You've always been there for me. Always. Keanu squeezed her hand, a lump forming in his throat. He wanted to tell her everything, but the words felt too heavy to say. Instead, he nodded and pulled her into a gentle embrace. For a moment, they just sat there, the weight of the world pressing down on them both. But in that moment, there was peace, and it was all he could offer her now. I love you, Lily, he whispered into her hair. I love you too, Dad. And as the evening faded into night, Keanu's mind wandered back to the album, to the moments frozen in time. There was still so much he wished he could give her. So many things he still wanted to say. But time, as always, had other plans. And so, as the clock ticked on, Keanu made a silent vow to himself. He would do everything in his power to make the most of the time he had left with Lily. He would give her his last wish, a chance to say goodbye. The dim light of the room seemed to soften the harshness of Keanu's thoughts as he stared out the window, lost in the reflection of his own life. It had always been difficult for him to reconcile the man the world saw, the Hollywood star, the beloved actor, with the man he was on the inside. Behind the smiles and the press conferences, Keanu had lived through his fair share of struggles. His past was marked by grief, loss, and a constant desire to understand the meaning of his own existence. His childhood, like many others, was filled with the typical milestones of growing up. First steps, school dances, and the occasional scraped knee. But for Keanu, there was always something deeper, something quieter, more intense. He had never been the kind of child who sought the spotlight. He was introspective, often lost in his own thoughts, a dreamer more than a doer. His parents had divorced when he was young, and though they remained amicable, it had left a void in his heart. Keanu's mother, Patricia, was the one who raised him, and she did so with an immense amount of love, even if her own life was complicated. She was a talented costume designer, often juggling work with raising Keanu alone, and her absence, in terms of emotional support, was felt by Keanu as he navigated his adolescence. She encouraged him to pursue his dreams, but there was always a feeling of something missing, a sense of longing for a father figure, someone to guide him through his turbulent emotions. It wasn't until his sister Kim came into his life that he began to understand the power of familial love. Kim, much younger than him, was the one person who truly anchored him. They were inseparable, their bond formed over years of shared memories. It was with Kim that Keanu felt a sense of protection, a sense that no matter how hard life might get, they would be there for each other. But life, as it so often does, had other plans. When Keanu was just 23, Kim was diagnosed with leukemia. The illness hit Keanu hard, shattering his world in a way he couldn't have anticipated. He found himself helpless, unable to do anything to save her. The hospital visits, the long nights filled with anxiety, and the eventual loss of his sister left a scar on Keanu's soul that never fully healed. He withdrew further into himself after Kim's passing, unable to connect with the people around him. It was around this time that he began his rise to fame. The success of films like Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure and Point Break catapulted him into the public eye, but it did little to fill the void left by Kim's death. Despite the accolades and recognition, Keanu felt like he was living in a world that didn't truly understand him. His fame came with a price, a loss of privacy, a loss of personal connections. It was in this tumultuous time that he met Jennifer, the woman who would later become the love of his life. Jennifer was everything Keanu had longed for, warm, intelligent, and understanding. She was the one person who could make him laugh during the darkest of days, the one who saw beyond his fame and understood the pain that lingered in his heart. Their relationship was a quiet one, far from the prying eyes of the media, and that was exactly how Keanu liked it. With Jennifer, he could be himself. She made him feel grounded. But even the love he found with Jennifer couldn't shield him from the heartbreak that seemed to follow him. When Jennifer tragically passed away in a car accident, it was like the world had stolen the last piece of his happiness. The pain was unbearable, and Keanu once again found himself lost in a sea of grief. His solitude became even more pronounced, as if the universe was testing him, seeing just how much he could endure. Yet, in the midst of his sorrow, there was one light. One person who always brought him back to the surface, Lily. Lily was born a year after Jennifer's death, and from the moment Keanu laid eyes on her, he knew his life had irrevocably changed. She was his redemption, his second chance at love, and perhaps more importantly, his reason to continue living. He had always wanted to be a father, but the timing had never felt right. Now, with the arrival of Lily, Keanu threw himself into fatherhood with everything he had. He poured all the love he had to offer into her, and as she grew, he found himself smiling again. The pain of his past was always there, lurking in the background, but with Lily, it became a little more bearable. In the years that followed, Keanu worked hard to shield her from the pressures of his public life. He made sure that she knew love, unconditional, unwavering love. He tried to balance his career with his role as a father, though there were times when it felt like the demands of fame came crashing down on him. Despite the difficulties, Keanu found peace in his daughter's eyes. She became his center, the one person who reminded him every day of the possibility of joy. But deep down, Keanu knew that the world wasn't always kind, and time, as it always did, would eventually steal the one thing he couldn't bear to lose, his time with Lily. As he sat there, reflecting on his past, Keanu couldn't help but think about the future. The future he knew would be far too short. He was running out of time, and there were so many things he still wanted to do for Lily, so many memories he wanted to create with her. But all he had left was the present, and in the present, he was determined to be the best father he could be. The weight of his past, the struggles, the pain, and the loss, all seemed to merge into one singular feeling: love. It had been love that had carried him through the darkest days, and it was love that would continue to push him forward. For Lily. Always for Lily. As he stood up from the couch, Keanu took a deep breath. The future was uncertain, but in this moment, he was determined to make the most of the time he had left. He had one more chance to make things right. One more chance to show his daughter just how much he loved her, and he wasn't going to waste it. Keanu sat on the edge of his bed, staring at a photo frame on his nightstand. It was a picture of Lily, taken just a few years ago, her bright eyes filled with mischief and joy. In that moment, he could see a reflection of his younger self, that spark, that innocence, that hope. She was growing up so fast, and sometimes it felt like he was watching from the sidelines, unable to fully be there in the way he wanted. But today, he was determined to change that. As he slowly stood up, he heard the sound of light footsteps outside his door, and before he could say anything, the door creaked open. There, standing in the doorway, was Lily. "Dad, you're up early," she said, a soft smile playing on her lips. Despite the weight that Keanu carried on his shoulders, the sight of Lily's smile always managed to lift his spirits. She had the same warmth as Jennifer, the same quiet strength that reminded him of the love they had shared. "Yeah, just thinking," Keanu replied, offering her a faint smile. "Want to join me for a walk?" Lily nodded enthusiastically. She had always been close to Keanu, even though the pressures of his fame often pulled him away. It wasn't easy, raising a child when the world was watching you every step of the way. Keanu had tried his best to shield Lily from the constant attention, but as she got older, the spotlight had a way of finding her too. But they had learned to carve out small moments of peace. Moments like this. Together, they stepped outside, the cool morning air brushing against their faces as they began their walk. The sun had just risen, casting a golden light over the city, and Keanu couldn't help but marvel at how beautiful everything seemed. For a moment, it felt like everything was right in the world, as though he could keep this peace forever. But as always, time loomed large in his mind, a constant reminder that moments like these were fleeting. "How's school going?" Keanu asked, breaking the comfortable silence between them. "It's good. I'm doing well in most of my classes, but I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do next," Lily answered, her voice thoughtful. "I've been thinking about maybe pursuing something in art or photography. I don't know. I guess I'm still figuring it out." Keanu smiled, feeling a sense of pride welling up inside of him. He had always encouraged Lily to follow her passions, no matter where they led. There were no expectations, no pressure to follow in his footsteps, no expectations to become something she wasn't. He wanted her to find her own path, to create a life that felt true to her. "You know, your mom was an artist," Keanu said softly, his voice carrying a trace of nostalgia. "She always had a way of seeing the world differently, through her art. I think she'd be proud of you, no matter what you decide to do." Lily looked at him, her eyes searching his face. "I know you miss her, Dad," she said quietly, her hand slipping into his. Keanu squeezed her hand, grateful for the way she always seemed to understand. "I do. Every day." They continued walking in silence, the only sound the rustle of the leaves in the breeze. It was moments like this, simple yet profound, that reminded Keanu of the beauty of life. Despite everything that had happened, despite the pain and loss, there was love. There was Lily. They stopped at a small park near their home, a place Keanu used to visit with Jennifer when they were first starting their life together. It was quiet, secluded, a place where he could let his guard down and just be with the people he loved. He sat down on a bench, and Lily sat beside him, resting her head on his shoulder. "Dad, do you ever think about, I don't know, what happens after?" Lily asked, her voice almost hesitant. Keanu knew exactly what she meant. It wasn't the first time she had asked him about life and death, about the things that couldn't be avoided. He had always done his best to protect her from such heavy thoughts, but the truth was, Lily was growing up. She needed to understand the realities of the world, just as he had learned to face them. "I think about it a lot," Keanu replied, his voice soft but steady. "We don't really know what happens after. But what I do know is this. You carry the people you love with you, in your heart, no matter where they go. And as long as you live your life with love and kindness, you're never really alone." Lily looked up at him, her eyes searching his face for any sign of uncertainty. But all she saw was the quiet strength of a man who had faced more than his fair share of loss and had come out the other side, holding on to the most important thing of all, love. "I want you to know something," Keanu continued, his voice steady. "No matter what happens, you will always have me with you. I'll be in every memory, in every lesson I've taught you. You will carry me with you, and that's something no one can take away." Lily smiled, the weight of his words sinking in. She wasn't sure what the future held, but she knew that her father's love would always be a part of her, just as it had always been. Keanu reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, silver pendant, a gift he had bought for Lily many years ago. It was a simple design, but to him, it symbolized everything he had wanted to give her. A piece of his heart, a reminder of their connection. "I want you to have this," he said, holding out the pendant. "It's not just a necklace. It's a piece of me that I want you to keep, no matter what happens." Lily took the pendant, her fingers brushing against his. "I'll never take it off," she promised, her voice filled with a quiet resolve. As they sat there, side by side, the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting long shadows across the park. Keanu's heart swelled with pride, with love, with a deep sense of gratitude. This moment, this connection, was everything. It was all he could give her now, and it was enough. As they stood to leave, Keanu looked at Lily, his daughter, his reason for everything. She was strong, she was capable, and she would be okay, even if he couldn't be there to see it. "You ready to head home?" Keanu asked, his voice soft but warm. Lily nodded, her hand slipping into his once more. "Let's go, Dad." As the days passed, Keanu found himself struggling with the weight of the unspoken truth hanging over him. The moment he had feared for so long had finally arrived. His illness, the one he had tried to ignore, had progressed faster than expected. There was no escaping the reality now. The doctors had been blunt, giving him a timeline that was shorter than he had hoped. He had tried to stay positive, to push through it for Lily's sake. But there were days when the exhaustion was overwhelming. Keanu had always been the type to bottle up his emotions, to carry the burden on his own. But now, more than ever, he realized that he couldn't keep hiding the truth from Lily. She deserved to know what was happening. It wasn't fair to her to keep living in a bubble of uncertainty, pretending like everything was going to be fine when it clearly wasn't. But how could he tell her? How could he look into her eyes and tell her that he wouldn't be there for her forever? The question plagued him day and night. He had no answers, no easy way to break the news. All he could do was hope that somehow he would find the strength to say it when the time came. It was one quiet afternoon, as the sun began to set, that Keanu found himself sitting with Lily in their living room. She was curled up on the couch, reading a book, and for a moment, everything felt normal. But Keanu could feel the heaviness in the air. The knowledge that this moment, like so many others, was slipping away faster than he wanted to admit. Lily glanced up from her book and caught her father staring at her, his gaze distant. It didn't take much for her to see that something was off. She set the book aside and sat up, her eyes narrowing in concern. "Dad? Are you okay?" she asked, her voice soft but filled with care. Keanu took a deep breath, running a hand through his hair. He wanted to say something, to reassure her, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, he simply nodded, offering her a faint smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I'm fine, sweetheart," he said, though the lie hung in the air between them. Lily didn't buy it. She had known her father long enough to know when he was pretending. She got up from the couch and walked over to him, sitting down beside him. "Dad," she began, her voice steady but gentle. "You've been different lately. You don't have to hide it from me. Whatever it is, we'll get through it together." Keanu swallowed hard. Her words hit him like a ton of bricks. How could he explain it? How could he tell her the truth without breaking her heart? He looked at her, his eyes filled with a mix of love and fear. For a long moment, he said nothing, unsure of where to begin. But finally, he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "Lily, I haven't been completely honest with you," he said, his hands trembling slightly. "I've been sick. The doctors, they don't think there's much time left." Lily froze, the words taking a moment to register in her mind. For a moment, there was only silence, the kind of silence that seemed to stretch on forever. She searched his face, looking for some sign that this was just a nightmare, a cruel joke. But the look in his eyes told her it wasn't. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice shaking. "What's happening, Dad?" Keanu took her hands in his grip tight, his heart breaking. "I've been diagnosed with a terminal illness," he explained, his voice cracking. "There's nothing more they can do. The doctors gave me a prognosis, and it's not what we wanted." Lily's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't cry out. She didn't scream. She just sat there, holding her father's hands, her mind racing as she tried to process the reality of what he was saying. But you're my dad," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You can't just leave." Keanu closed his eyes, trying to find the words to comfort her, but he knew there were no words that would make this easier. There was nothing he could say that would undo the pain, the fear, the uncertainty that had suddenly consumed their lives. "I know," he said quietly, his voice filled with regret. "I don't want to leave you. I want to be here for you, always. But sometimes life doesn't give us the time we wish for." Lily looked at him, her heart breaking. She had always known that life was unpredictable, that nothing was guaranteed. But she never imagined it would be her father, the one person who had always been there for her, who would be taken away so soon. A tear slipped down her cheek, but she quickly wiped it away, trying to be strong for him. "I don't want you to go," she said, her voice barely more than a whisper. "I know, sweetheart," Keanu said softly. "I don't want to go either. But I need you to know. No matter what happens, I will always love you. I will always be with you, in your heart. Nothing can ever take that away." Lily leaned into him, burying her face in his chest, unable to hold back the tears any longer. Keanu wrapped his arms around her, holding her close, trying to offer what little comfort he could. He knew there was nothing that could make this better, nothing that could take away the pain of the moment. But he also knew that this was the hardest thing he would ever have to do, to let her go, to prepare her for a life without him. As they sat there, Keanu held onto the one thing he could control, his love for Lily. It would be the one thing that would stay with her, even when he was gone. And in that moment, it was all he could give her. "I love you, Lily," he whispered, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "I love you too, Dad," she replied, her voice muffled by his embrace. And in that silence, in that shared sorrow, Keanu felt the weight of the truth that they both knew but had never spoken aloud. Time was running out, but for now, they had this moment, and that was enough. Days turned into weeks, and Keanu's condition continued to deteriorate. What had once been a life filled with endless possibilities now felt like a ticking clock, each second slipping away faster than he was ready to accept. The doctors had given him an estimate, a prognosis that he tried to ignore, but as the symptoms grew more intense, there was no denying it any longer. Yet, despite the heavy shadow that loomed over them both, Keanu and Lily found ways to hold on to the good. They spent time together in small ways, making pancakes in the mornings, watching movies on the couch, taking long walks in the park. Keanu cherished these moments, storing them away in his heart as the foundation of his final days. One evening, as they sat together in the living room, the quiet hum of the city outside offering the only background noise, Keanu turned to Lily with a softness in his eyes that was rare. His face had begun to show the wear of his illness, pale skin, faint circles under his eyes, but it didn't change the depth of the love he felt for her. "Lily, there's something I need to tell you," Keanu said, his voice shaky but resolute. Lily looked up from the book she had been reading. She could sense the weight of the moment, the seriousness in his tone. She set the book aside and turned her full attention to him, her heart racing. "What is it, Dad?" Keanu hesitated for a moment, as though searching for the right words. He had always been good at hiding his emotions, keeping them tucked safely away in his heart, but now he found himself with no choice but to share them, to open up in ways he had never done before. "I want you to know that I'm not afraid," he began, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm not afraid of what's coming. I'm at peace with it, because I know I've had a life filled with love. And you, Lily, you're the greatest gift I've ever received." Lily's throat tightened. She had always known her father to be strong, steady, and grounded, but the vulnerability in his voice now tore at her heart. She wanted to say something, to tell him that she wasn't ready, that she couldn't imagine a world without him, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she simply reached for his hand, holding it tightly. "You've always been my rock, Dad," Lily whispered, "and you always will be. I don't know how I'll get through this without you, but I know you've made me strong. You've taught me how to love, how to be kind, how to find joy even in the toughest times." Keanu smiled, a soft, bittersweet smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He had always hoped that Lily would be okay without him. He had done everything he could to give her the tools she needed to face life on her own. But now, as the end drew near, he couldn't help but wish for more time. More time to teach her, more time to love her, more time to watch her grow. "Promise me something," Keanu said, his voice barely a whisper. "Promise me that you'll live a life full of love, just like we always talked about. And don't let my absence hold you back. Live fully, Lily. You deserve all the happiness in the world." Lily nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I promise, Dad. I promise I'll live the life you've always wanted for me." Keanu squeezed her hand, feeling the warmth of her touch, even as his strength began to fade. "I'm proud of you, Lily," he said, his voice cracking. "So incredibly proud." The silence that followed was heavy, laden with both the weight of their sorrow and the peace that came with acceptance. Keanu had always been someone who shied away from attention, who kept his emotions close to his chest. But now, in these final moments, he understood the importance of saying the things that needed to be said. No more hiding, no more running from the truth. In the days that followed, Keanu's health continued to decline. He spent his time mostly in bed, surrounded by the people who loved him. His closest friends, family, and, most importantly, Lily. They shared stories, laughter, and moments of quiet reflection. They held on to each other tightly, finding comfort in the connection they still had, even as time ran out. One evening, as the sun set on the horizon, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink, Keanu gathered the strength to do one final thing for Lily. It had been on his mind for days, but he had put it off, not wanting to face the inevitable. But now, with the end so close, he knew it was time. "Lily," he said, his voice weaker now, but still filled with love, "I want you to have something that's been with me for a long time." From his bedside drawer, he pulled out a small, worn box. Inside was a delicate, silver bracelet, one that he had worn for years, a gift from Jennifer when they were first married. It had always meant so much to him, a symbol of the love they had shared and the life they had built together. Keanu held the bracelet out to Lily, his eyes filled with tenderness. "This is for you," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "It's a piece of me, a reminder of everything we've shared. I want you to wear it, always." Lily took the bracelet from his hand, her fingers trembling as she ran her thumb over the smooth surface. She had seen the bracelet before, but never understood its significance. Now, as she held it in her hand, she understood it all. It wasn't just a piece of jewelry. It was a symbol of everything her father had given her. His love, his strength, his guidance. It was the final gift he would give her. "I'll wear it forever," she promised, tears welling in her eyes. "I'll never forget you, Dad. Not ever." Keanu smiled, the last remnants of his strength fading away. "I know, sweetheart," he whispered. "I know." And with that, Keanu Reeves closed his eyes, his hand gently holding Lily's as he took his final breath. The world had lost a legend, but for Lily, the love her father had given her would remain with her forever. Through every challenge, through every joy, and through every moment of life that lay ahead, she would carry a piece of him with her, a piece of his heart, his wisdom, and his unshakable love. And that would be enough. Always. The days following Keanu's passing felt like a blur to Lily. The world seemed to have stopped moving, leaving her stuck in a moment that was too big to fully grasp. She found herself waking up every morning expecting to hear her father's footsteps, to feel the comfort of his presence. But all she felt was an empty space beside her. The funeral had been a quiet affair, attended by only the closest friends and family. Keanu had never wanted a grand public display of his life, so Lily honored his wishes with a simple ceremony, one where they could remember him for who he truly was, a kind, gentle man who had touched the hearts of everyone he met. As the days stretched on, Lily struggled to navigate the weight of grief. It was overwhelming, and there were moments when she felt like she might collapse under it. But even in the darkest of times, she found herself drawing on the lessons her father had taught her, to face each day with courage, to hold onto the love he had given her, and to find beauty in the small things. One afternoon, a few weeks after her father's passing, Lily was sitting alone in their living room, flipping through an old photo album. The familiar faces of family and friends smiled up at her from the pages, but it was the pictures of her and Keanu that stopped her heart. There they were, smiling together on vacations, at birthdays, at holidays, each moment frozen in time. As she traced her finger along the edges of the photos, she felt a sharp pang in her chest. She missed him so much, but she also knew, deep down, that she couldn't keep living in the past. Keanu wouldn't want that for her. He had always been the one to encourage her to follow her dreams, to never settle for less than the life she deserved. And now, more than ever, she needed to honor that. Lily set the photo album aside and stood up, walking to the window. The sun was setting, casting a warm golden light over the city, and for the first time in weeks, Lily felt a small flicker of hope. It wasn't gone yet. She wasn't lost. There was still a future ahead of her, one that her father had always wanted her to have. With a deep breath, Lily made a decision. It was time to move forward, to take the next step, whatever that might be. She would never forget her father, never stop loving him. But she had her own life to live, and it was up to her to make it something he would be proud of. She turned away from the window and picked up her phone, dialing the number she had been avoiding for weeks. It was time to make the call that she had put off, the one that had felt too overwhelming until now. "Hello?" A voice answered on the other end of the line. "Lily," the voice said, with an edge of surprise. "Is everything okay?" It was her aunt, who had been a second mother to Lily for as long as she could remember. They hadn't spoken much since Keanu's passing. Lily hadn't been ready for it, but now she felt the need to reach out, to rebuild the connections she had let slip away in the wake of her grief. "I think it's time," Lily said, her voice soft but steady. "It's time to move forward. I want to come visit you. Maybe I can start thinking about what comes next." Her aunt was silent for a moment, and then she responded warmly. "I think that's a good idea. You've been through so much, Lily. It's time for you to take a step forward. Whenever you're ready, we'll be here for you." Lily felt a sense of relief wash over her. She wasn't alone. She had family, friends, and people who cared about her, who would help her move forward, one step at a time. She wasn't ready to let go of the past, but she was ready to start living again. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of emotions, and Lily slowly began to take the necessary steps toward healing. She visited her aunt, who lived in a quiet town a few hours away and spent time in the peace and calm of the countryside. It gave her the space to breathe, to think, and to reflect on everything her father had taught her. During this time, Lily also began to explore her own passions. She enrolled in an art class, something her father had always encouraged her to pursue. She found herself sketching for hours, lost in the creative flow, just as her father had done with his own work in the past. It felt like a piece of him was still with her, guiding her as she discovered new parts of herself. As she honed her skills and explored the world of photography and painting, Lily began to see the beauty of the world in a new light. She found peace in her art, in the quiet moments when she could lose herself in a canvas or a photograph. And in every brushstroke, every click of the camera, she could feel her father's love, still there, still present, still pushing her to be the best version of herself. Lily's journey wasn't easy. There were days when the grief would wash over her again, when the memories of her father felt too painful to bear. But she learned to honor his memory by living fully, by continuing the path he had always hoped for her, one of love, creativity, and resilience. As she stood on a small hill overlooking the town, the sun setting in the distance, Lily thought about everything she had been through. It had been the hardest time of her life, but she had come out on the other side stronger, more determined, and more alive than ever. Her father had given her the greatest gift, the gift of love, and it was that love that would carry her forward, no matter what the future held. And for the first time in a long time, Lily allowed herself to believe in the possibility of a bright, beautiful future, one that her father would have wanted her to embrace with all her heart. She was ready to live, to love, and to keep moving forward, for Keanu, for herself, and for the life that still awaited her. It had been months since Lily had taken the first step toward moving forward. Though the pain of losing her father never fully dissipated, she had found herself learning how to cope, how to heal, and how to embrace the life she had left. Keanu's absence remained a constant ache in her heart, but the lessons he had taught her, the resilience, the courage to face what seemed impossible, and the importance of living a life filled with love, had become her guiding lights. Lily had spent a considerable amount of time in the quiet town with her aunt, using the change of scenery to help her rediscover her sense of self. The country air, the endless fields, and the slow pace of life gave her the space to breathe, to reflect, and to begin seeing the world through a different lens. It was here, in the solitude of nature, that Lily began her photography journey. What had started as a simple hobby, a way to pass the time and channel her grief, slowly transformed into something much deeper. Every snapshot she took felt like an act of catharsis, a way to capture the fleeting beauty in the world around her. It became her way of honoring her father's memory, as Keanu had always seen the world through an artist's eye, with appreciation for the small, everyday moments that others often overlooked. Lily's art was deeply personal. Each image she captured told a story of love, loss, beauty, and healing. But as she developed her skills, she began to realize something that surprised her. Her photos weren't just for herself anymore. There was a story in every frame that she wanted to share with others, to help them see the world the way she now did. She wanted her father's legacy of love and creativity to live on, and through her photography, it would. One chilly morning, as she sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee in her hands, her aunt, who had been her greatest support, came into the room with a letter in hand. "Lily, you've got a letter from an art gallery in the city," her aunt said, her voice filled with surprise. "It looks important." Lily's heart skipped a beat. The gallery had been a place she had dreamed of showcasing her work one day, but she hadn't submitted anything to them, hadn't even considered the possibility of putting her photos out there. Could it really be for her? Taking the letter from her aunt's hands, Lily tore it open and began to read. Her eyes scanned the words quickly, and as the message began to sink in, a wide smile spread across her face. The gallery wanted to feature her work in an upcoming exhibit. "Unbelievable," Lily whispered, her voice filled with awe. "They actually want my photos. They want to showcase them." Her aunt beamed at her. "I always knew you had it in you. Your father would be so proud." Lily felt a mix of emotions, shock, excitement, and a sense of validation that she hadn't expected. It wasn't just about the recognition, though. It was about honoring the journey she had been on and the person her father had helped her become. Keanu's love for art, his unwavering belief in her abilities, had been the foundation she had built her life upon. This was the manifestation of all that hard work, the passion he had instilled in her, and the courage to keep moving forward. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of preparation. Lily had to select her best pieces, frame them, and prepare herself for the exhibit. It was nerve-wracking. The thought of putting her work out for public viewing, where strangers could judge it, but it was also thrilling. For the first time in a long time, Lily felt like she was on the verge of something huge, something that would change the course of her life forever. The night of the exhibit arrived, and Lily found herself standing in front of the gallery, her heart racing. She had never imagined this moment would come, but here she was. The gallery was bustling with guests, their laughter and voices filling the space. The walls were adorned with her photographs, each one telling a story of life, love, and the beauty of the world Keanu had shown her. As Lily walked through the gallery, she stopped in front of one of her favorite pieces, a photograph she had taken of a sunset over the fields near her aunt's home. The colors in the sky were vibrant, the landscape bathed in the soft glow of the fading light. It was a moment that had captured her heart, a moment of pure peace. And now, it was part of something bigger than herself. She stood there for a long time, lost in the image, feeling the quiet presence of her father beside her. She could almost hear his voice, telling her that this was what it was all about, capturing the beauty of life, sharing it with the world, and never being afraid to live fully. "You've done it," her aunt's voice interrupted her thoughts. Lily turned to find her standing behind her, a proud smile on her face. "Look at how far you've come. This is just the beginning." Lily nodded, a sense of calm washing over her. "I think he would have liked this," she said quietly, her voice full of emotion. "Dad always believed in the power of art. I'm glad I could do this for him." Her aunt wrapped her arms around her in a warm hug. "He's with you, Lily, every step of the way." As the night wore on, Lily found herself speaking with people about her work, the story behind each photograph, the journey she had taken to get to this point. She felt a connection to each person she spoke with, and she realized that her photography wasn't just an act of personal healing anymore. It was a way to connect with others, to show them the world in a new light, to remind them that beauty could still be found, even in the most difficult of times. By the end of the evening, Lily's heart was full. She had shared her work, honored her father's memory, and connected with people who saw the world as she did, through the lens of love, resilience, and the beauty that existed in the everyday. As she packed up her things and prepared to leave the gallery, Lily took one last look at her photographs. The future felt uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, she was filled with hope. There were still many unknowns, many challenges ahead, but she knew one thing for sure. Her father's love would always guide her, no matter where life took her. And with that knowledge, Lily stepped into the future, ready to embrace whatever came next. As Lily's art career began to take flight, she realized that her journey had only just begun. The gallery exhibit had been a massive success, with several of her pieces selling to enthusiastic collectors. For the first time in a long while, Lily felt a spark of excitement about the future. She was no longer just a girl grieving the loss of her father. She was an artist with a story to tell, and the world was beginning to listen. But as much as she had embraced the new chapter in her life, there was still a lingering sense of uncertainty. For so long, her identity had been tied to Keanu, to being his daughter, his legacy. Now that he was gone, she had to find a way to redefine who she was, to step into her own light, separate from his shadow. It was a daunting task, but Lily was determined to find her own voice, to create something that was uniquely hers. One afternoon, after a busy day of preparing for an upcoming exhibition in New York, Lily sat in her studio, reflecting on how far she had come. She stared at a blank canvas in front of her, a wave of doubt creeping over her. She had so much to express, so many emotions to capture, but what was the right way to do it? Was she creating her art for herself? Or was she still trying to live up to the expectations she had always felt from others? She ran a hand through her hair, frustrated by the silence that filled the room. The pressure to succeed, to be perfect, weighed heavily on her. She had been on a fast track since her father's passing, immersing herself in work, diving into her art, and pushing herself to achieve things she never thought possible. But now, in this quiet moment, she found herself at a crossroads. Just as she was about to give in to the growing uncertainty, the phone rang. It was a number she didn't recognize, but her intuition told her to answer. "Hello?" she said, her voice tentative. "Hi, Lily. This is Claire Thompson, from the gallery in New York. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." Lily's heart skipped a beat. Claire was one of the top curators at the gallery, and they had exchanged a few emails in the past few months about the upcoming exhibition. "No, not at all," Lily replied, her voice regaining a bit of confidence. "What's up?" "I wanted to talk to you about something exciting," Claire said. "We've been so impressed with your work, and we were wondering if you would be interested in doing a solo show. We're looking for new, fresh voices for next year's exhibition lineup, and we think you're the perfect fit." Lily's breath caught in her throat. A solo show? This was beyond anything she had imagined. It was a huge opportunity, one that could propel her career into the stratosphere. But with the excitement came a new wave of pressure. Could she truly live up to the expectations? Could she create something that felt authentic to her, something that spoke to who she was now, and not just who she had been as Keanu Reeves' daughter? "I'd love to," Lily said, her voice shaky but resolute. "I just need some time to think about it. It's a big step, and I want to make sure I approach it in the right way." "I completely understand," Claire said, her tone warm and encouraging. "Take your time. We're really excited about the possibility of working with you. Let us know what you decide, and we can start discussing details when you're ready." After the call ended, Lily sat in silence, her mind spinning. A solo show. It was everything she had dreamed of as an artist, but it also felt like a leap into the unknown. For years, she had used her art to process her grief, to navigate the complexities of her emotions. But now, the stakes were higher. The world was going to see her, not as Keanu's daughter, but as Lily, the artist. And that terrified her. She leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes and trying to steady her racing thoughts. She missed her father more than she could express, but this was her chance to step forward, to honor him in a new way. She knew he would have wanted her to embrace this opportunity. Keanu had never been one to shy away from a challenge, and neither should she. After a long pause, Lily opened her eyes and made a decision. She would do it. She would create a body of work that was uniquely hers, a collection that told the story of who she had become since her father's passing. It would be raw, it would be vulnerable, and it would be filled with the love he had given her. But it would also be her own. She picked up her phone and called Claire back. "I'm in," Lily said, her voice filled with quiet determination. "Let's do it." The following months were a whirlwind of creativity and reflection. Lily spent countless hours in her studio, pouring her heart and soul into each piece. She struggled at times, questioning herself, but each moment of doubt was met with the reminder that she was creating not just for an audience, but for herself. It was a way to express the pain, the healing, and the joy she had experienced on her journey since Keanu's passing. The theme of her solo exhibition slowly emerged, the light after the storm. It was a reflection of the duality of life, the grief, the loss, and the eventual emergence of hope and peace. It was a collection that captured both the darkness and the light, the raw emotions and the beauty that came after the storm had passed. The exhibition opening in New York was set for the fall, and as the date drew closer, Lily felt a growing sense of anticipation. She was ready. She had poured everything into these pieces, her love for her father, her journey through grief, and her newfound sense of self. It was time to share her story with the world. The night of the exhibition arrived, and Lily stood in front of the gallery, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel Keanu's presence with her, as if he were standing beside her, proud of the woman she had become. She had come so far, and now it was her time to shine. As guests filed in, admiring the collection, Lily felt a quiet sense of peace settle over her. She was no longer just a daughter mourning her father. She was an artist with a story to tell, and the world was listening. And for the first time in her life, she realized that the road ahead was hers to travel, and she was no longer afraid to walk it. Lily stood at the entrance of the gallery, quietly watching the crowd as they moved from piece to piece, captivated by the photographs and paintings that adorned the walls. The opening night of her solo exhibition was nothing short of a triumph. People were admiring her work, discussing the emotions behind each piece, and even buying some of her prints. But amid the congratulations and praise, Lily still felt the weight of uncertainty. Her father's presence had been with her every step of the way, pushing her forward, inspiring her to create. But now that she was on the other side of it, with the show in full swing, she felt something unexpected. A sense of detachment, as if she had accomplished something big, but still hadn't fully accepted that she had reached this milestone. She excused herself from a conversation with a well-meaning patron, stepping outside onto the gallery's small balcony to gather her thoughts. The cool autumn breeze felt refreshing against her skin, and she closed her eyes for a moment, breathing in the crisp air. It was surreal. She had spent years in the shadows, either directly or indirectly, under the weight of Keanu's fame. But now, she was standing in a space entirely her own, with no one to answer to accept herself. And yet, despite the external success, a quiet voice inside her wondered if it was all enough. Could she continue to live up to the potential people saw in her? Was she truly ready to claim this life for herself? Or was she still searching for approval, for validation from others, and from the memory of her father? The sound of footsteps behind her pulled her from her thoughts. She turned to find her aunt, who had always been her rock, walking toward her with a proud smile. "Looks like it's a success," her aunt said, her eyes scanning the crowd inside. Lily nodded slowly. "It's overwhelming, Aunt Claire. I don't know if I'm ready for all of this. I still feel like I'm living in my father's shadow." Her aunt smiled warmly, walking over to stand beside her. "I think you've already stepped out of it, Lily. This work, your work, speaks for itself. Your father's love is in every brushstroke, but what makes it truly special is that it's coming from you. Don't ever forget that." Lily's eyes filled with tears. It was a relief to hear those words, to have someone who truly understood. She had spent so long trying to fill the space left by Keanu's absence, but perhaps the real journey was not about filling that space. It was about creating a new one that was entirely her own. "You're right," Lily said, her voice thick with emotion. "I think I've been holding on to his memory so tightly that I forgot to let myself grow. Maybe tonight is the first time I've truly felt like I can stand on my own." Her aunt reached out and placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You don't need to let go of him, Lily. He's always going to be a part of you. But now, you get to take that love and create something even more powerful with it. And you'll do it in your own way, at your own pace." Lily nodded, feeling the truth in her aunt's words. The path ahead was still unknown, but for the first time, she wasn't afraid of the uncertainty. It was the next chapter of her life, and she would write it in a way that was uniquely hers. As the night wore on, Lily continued to mingle with guests, answering questions about her work, sharing the stories behind her pieces, and enjoying the energy of the evening. The more she spoke about her art, the more she realized how much of herself was woven into it. Her journey through grief, her growth as an artist, and the love that had never truly left her, even after all this time. The evening ended with a small after-party at a nearby cafe, where a few close friends and art collectors gathered to celebrate her success. As Lily sipped on her drink, she found herself in a quiet conversation with one of the collectors, an older woman who had been moved by one of her pieces, a photograph of a stormy ocean, dark and tumultuous, but with a sliver of light breaking through the clouds. "It's beautiful," the woman said, her eyes reflecting a deep sense of understanding. "You've captured something very powerful here. What inspired this piece?" Lily paused, her mind wandering back to the time she had spent at her aunt's home, contemplating her future and the legacy she wanted to build. "It's about the storm we all go through in life, the darkness, the struggle. But no matter how fierce the storm is, there's always light on the other side. It may not be easy to see, but it's there, waiting for us." The woman smiled softly, as if she had heard a truth she had longed to hear. "That's what I saw when I looked at it. A light after the storm. A reminder that no matter how difficult the journey, there's always hope." Lily felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. In that moment, she understood that her work wasn't just a reflection of her grief, but a message for everyone who was struggling. A reminder that after the hardest of times, there was always the possibility of something new, something better. She wasn't just creating for herself, she was creating for the world. As the evening drew to a close, Lily stepped outside into the cool night air, her mind swirling with thoughts and emotions. She looked up at the stars, the same stars she and her father had often admired together. For a moment, she closed her eyes, imagining him there beside her, guiding her forward. And then, with a sense of clarity, she made a promise to herself. She would keep going. She would keep creating, keep sharing her story, and keep moving forward. Her father had shown her how to face the storms of life with grace and courage, and now, it was her turn to pass that lesson on through her art. As she walked down the city streets, her heart lightened, knowing that the road ahead, though uncertain, was hers to walk. And this time, she was ready for whatever it held. In the end, she realized that her father's legacy wasn't something to be carried as a burden. It was a gift that would continue to inspire her for the rest of her life. And she would carry that gift with love, courage, and hope as she forged her own path, one step at a time. The weeks following her exhibition flew by in a whirlwind of press interviews, art critiques, and new opportunities that Lily had never expected. The success of her solo show in New York had been the catalyst for a whole new chapter in her life. Gallery owners from around the country reached out to her, eager to feature her work, and collectors who had been moved by her photographs contacted her with offers to buy pieces that hadn't even been part of the exhibit. But amid the rush of emails, contracts, and calls, there was an unexpected feeling that lingered in Lily's chest, the weight of expectation, the pressure to sustain the success, to continue producing work that would live up to the excitement her first exhibition had generated, began to settle in. For the first time since the exhibit, Lily found herself staring at a blank canvas again. Only this time, it didn't feel like a space for creation. It felt like a space for judgment. She had once seen her art as an expression of herself, raw, authentic, and personal. But now, as her reputation as an artist grew, she felt a shift. She wasn't just creating for herself anymore. She was creating for others, for the critics, for the collectors, for the world. And that terrified her. Lily spent the next few days holed up in her studio, surrounded by unfinished pieces and the hum of the city outside. She barely slept, constantly doubting every decision she made. Was she losing her connection to her work? Was she simply producing for the sake of maintaining her success? Had the art she'd once created to heal now become just another commodity? Her thoughts were interrupted by the soft sound of a knock at the door. She had been so wrapped up in her own turmoil that she hadn't heard the footsteps approaching. Lily opened the door to find her aunt standing there, a warm smile on her face and a bag of takeout in her hands. "I thought you might need a break," her aunt said, stepping inside and setting the food down on the table. "You've been in here for days, and I can see that you're working yourself to the bone." Lily sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I don't know what's wrong with me, Aunt Claire. Everything's going great. I should be happy, but I can't shake this feeling that I've lost my way." Her aunt raised an eyebrow, sitting down across from her. "Lily, I think you've forgotten something important." "What?" Lily asked, her voice full of frustration. "That it's all just for show? That it's all about keeping up with what people want, not about creating what matters to me?" "No," her aunt said, her voice soft but firm. "You've forgotten why you started doing this in the first place. You didn't pick up a camera to impress anyone. You didn't start painting because you wanted fame or recognition. You did it because it helped you heal. It helped you process everything that was going on inside. And that's still the most important thing." Lily looked down at her hands, a deep breath catching in her throat. It was true. She had started this journey to deal with the grief of losing her father, to express the love and pain that had consumed her. But somewhere along the way, the outside world's expectations had begun to overshadow her own inner voice. "I don't know how to get back to that," Lily admitted. "How do I find the balance? How do I create for me, while still meeting the demands of the world?" Her aunt smiled gently. "You can't lose yourself in all of this, Lily. The world can wait. You can take your time. Remember that art doesn't have deadlines. You don't have to create on anyone's timeline but your own. The words felt like a balm to Lily's soul, soothing a wound she hadn't realized was still there. Her aunt was right. She had been so focused on the idea of keeping up with success, of being everything to everyone, that she had lost sight of the core reason she began creating in the first place, for herself and for the memory of her father. Take a break, her aunt continued. Go outside, live a little, and when you're ready, you'll find that spark again. You don't need to rush it. Lily nodded, a small smile forming on her lips for the first time in days. Thanks, Aunt Claire. I think I needed to hear that. Her aunt patted her hand and stood up. I'll leave you to it, but don't forget, art is meant to come from the heart, not from pressure, not from expectations, just from you. After her aunt left, Lily sat quietly for a moment, reflecting on what had been said. The pressure, the doubts, the constant noise of the outside world. It had all created a cloud over her creativity. But now, she realized, the answer wasn't in trying to meet everyone else's expectations. It was in finding her own rhythm, her own voice again. The next day, she decided to step away from her studio. She took her camera, grabbed a notebook, and left her apartment, feeling the weight on her shoulders begin to lift with each step she took out into the world. The city was bustling as usual, but to Lily, everything felt different now. She was seeing it all with fresh eyes, allowing herself to be fully present in the moment, without the constant pressure of what she should be doing. She walked through the park, snapping photos of things that caught her eye, the way the sun filtered through the trees, the delicate curves of a flower petal, the way the light played on the rippling surface of the pond. These were the things that had inspired her in the past, the moments of beauty that made her feel alive. Lily sat on a bench by the water and began to write in her notebook, capturing her thoughts, the emotions that flowed through her. She didn't know where it would lead, but for the first time in weeks, she wasn't worried about it. She was just being, and in that moment, she felt a sense of peace wash over her. She didn't need to have everything figured out. She didn't need to chase the world's approval. What she needed was to stay true to herself, to honor the love and lessons her father had left behind, and to trust that her art would continue to evolve in its own time. The road ahead was still uncertain, but Lily no longer feared it. She had found her way back to herself, and that was all that mattered. And so, with the sound of birds chirping in the background and the soft rustle of leaves in the wind, Lily continued to write, to create, and to live, one step at a time. Lily returned to her studio with a renewed sense of calm, the weight of her doubts finally lifting after that quiet afternoon in the park. The fresh air, the time away from the constant pressures, had cleared her mind. She had rediscovered why she began creating in the first place, to connect with her emotions, to heal, and to express herself in a way that words could never fully capture. And though the world had started to take notice, she realized that the real victory was in staying true to her art, no matter the audience. Still, as Lily began to ease back into her work, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. It was as if there were an unspoken gap, a part of herself she hadn't fully explored. She had told her story through her photography and paintings, but there were depths to her emotions that she hadn't yet expressed. Her father's passing was always present in her work, but it had mostly been filtered through grief and love. She hadn't yet allowed herself to explore what came after, the quiet moments of rebuilding and discovering who she was without him. One morning, after spending hours sketching new ideas and contemplating her next series, she received a call from a number she didn't recognize. Her heart skipped a beat when she saw it was a Los Angeles area code. She picked up the phone, her voice tight with uncertainty. Hello? Lily, it's Mark. How are you? The voice on the other end was calm but warm, like the sound of an old friend reaching out after a long time. Mark was her father's former publicist, someone Lily had only spoken to a few times over the years. She hadn't heard from him since her father's funeral. I'm doing well, I think, she replied, unsure of what this call meant. It's been a while. Is everything okay? I'm glad to hear you're doing well, Mark said. Listen, I know this might be a bit of a surprise, but I've been going through some of Keanu's old things. Papers, journals, letters. and I found something that I think you should see. It's, it's a letter he wrote to you." Lily's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't expected this. She had gone through her father's things after his passing, but she hadn't found much beyond the things he kept in his study, his favorite books, and a few framed photos. A letter to her? She hadn't even known such a thing existed. Mark continued, "I've been keeping it safe for you, just waiting for the right time to give it to you. I think now might be that time." Lily felt a wave of emotion rise up in her chest. She had always been so afraid of losing touch with her father's presence, of not having anything left of him beyond memories. The idea that he had written her a letter, something personal, something for her alone, felt like a part of him was still here. "When can I see it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can send it to you," Mark said, "but I think it might be better if I come by and give it to you in person. There's something else I think you'll want to know about." The curiosity in his voice piqued Lily's interest even more. She agreed to meet him the next day at her studio, knowing that this letter, whatever it contained, might provide more answers than she had ever expected. The following day, Mark arrived at her studio, a leather envelope in hand. He was as familiar as ever, with his easy smile and the same gentle presence that had made him one of her father's most trusted friends. He handed her the envelope, and she could feel the weight of it, as though it held more than just paper. "Thank you," Lily said softly, taking the letter from him. It was sealed, the edges worn slightly as though it had been opened and closed many times. There was no return address, no name on the front, just her own name, written carefully in her father's unmistakable handwriting. Mark watched her, a mixture of sympathy and understanding in his eyes. "I think you should read it when you're ready. But I'll tell you this, Lily. Your father was incredibly proud of you. More than you could know." Lily nodded, feeling the sting of emotion in her chest. She had always known that her father loved her, but to hear it from someone who had known him so well felt different. It felt like confirmation of a truth she had never been able to hear directly from him. She could feel the tears welling up in her eyes, but she forced them back, knowing that now was the time to read the letter. After Mark left, Lily sat at her desk, the envelope resting in front of her. She hesitated for a moment, her fingers tracing the edges of the paper. She hadn't expected something like this, something that would bring her face to face with the father she had lost. But as she slowly broke the seal, she realized that this letter wasn't just a piece of her past. It was a bridge to the future, a way for her to move forward while still holding on to the love they had shared. She unfolded the letter and began to read. "My dearest Lily, if you're reading this, it means I've gone before you. I wish I could be there to hold your hand through everything, but since I can't, I want you to know this. You are enough, just as you are. I've watched you grow, from the little girl who always asked questions to the young woman you've become. You've carried more weight on your shoulders than anyone should have to, but through it all, you've shown strength, compassion, and creativity. I'm proud of you, more than words can express. There will be times in your life when you feel like you're lost, like you're searching for something you can't find. There will be moments when you feel like the world is too much, that you'll never reach the place where you belong. But remember this, Lily, you are never alone. You have the strength inside of you, and you have the love of those who will always be with you. Your journey will be your own, and it will be beautiful in ways you can't yet imagine. I love you with all my heart. Don't be afraid to chase your dreams, and never doubt the impact you've had on the world. Yours, forever and always, Dad." Lily held the letter tightly to her chest, unable to stop the tears that streamed down her face. She could feel his presence so clearly in that moment, as if he were right there with her, offering his love and reassurance. The words he had written were simple, but they were everything she had needed to hear. Her father believed in her. He had always believed in her. And now, it was time for her to believe in herself. She stood up from her desk and walked to the window, the letter still clutched in her hands. Outside, the city buzzed with energy, full of life and possibility. And for the first time in a long while, Lily felt ready to embrace whatever came next. She wasn't just Keanu Reeves' daughter anymore. She was Lily, an artist, a creator, a woman who had her own path to follow. And her father's words would be the guiding light along the way. And as she looked up at the sky, She whispered a quiet thank you, knowing that her father's love would continue to shape her every step, no matter where life took her. Lily spent the next few days in a quiet reflection, letting her father's letter sink into her soul. It wasn't just the comfort of his words that had moved her. It was the revelation that her journey was her own, independent of anyone else's expectations or legacy. For the first time, she felt an overwhelming sense of clarity. She didn't have to live up to some idealized version of what others thought she should be. She just needed to honor the person her father had always believed her to be: strong, capable, and worthy of pursuing her own dreams. It was in this moment of quiet self-realization that Lily realized her next step. She needed to explore her art in a new way, to fully embrace her own voice and story. She didn't have to recreate the past or attempt to fill any space her father had left behind. She could carve her own path forward, and for the first time, she knew exactly how to do it. Her first act of this new beginning was simple yet profound. She packed her camera bag and headed to a place that had always inspired her: the coastline where she and her father had spent many summer days together. The place where they talked for hours. The place where she first felt the freedom to create, where the rhythm of the waves seemed to harmonize with her heartbeat. As the days grew longer and the air warmer, Lily found herself sitting on the same rocky cliffs, her camera aimed at the vast ocean before her. She snapped pictures of the crashing waves, the sharp rocks, the soft sea foam drifting back into the tide. The coast was still the same, yet something within her had shifted. It felt like a homecoming, a return to the simplicity of creation without the constraints of expectations. For the first time, she wasn't just capturing the beauty of the world around her. She was capturing the beauty within herself, her own emotions, her own story unfolding in the images she took. Each photograph was a representation of her journey. The stormy moments, the quiet reflections, and the bursts of light that came after the darkness. One afternoon, as she stood on the beach, staring out at the ocean, she remembered the stories her father had told her about his travels, the places he'd seen, the people he'd met. He'd always said that the world was full of wonder, waiting to be discovered. And now, Lily understood what he meant. The world was still full of those discoveries, not just for him, but for her as well. When she returned home, Lily started to work on a new series, a blend of photographs and paintings that captured her healing process and the journey toward embracing her own identity. The light, the darkness, the transitions. Her father's presence was still there, a guiding force, but her own evolution as an artist was the central theme of the collection. One evening, while she worked late into the night, a soft knock on the door interrupted her concentration. She opened the door to find her aunt standing in the hallway, a warm smile on her face. "I figured you might need a little break," Aunt Claire said, holding up a box of her favorite takeout. Lily laughed and stepped aside to let her in. "You always know when I'm drowning in work," she said, her smile genuine. They sat down together, and for the first time in a long while, Lily felt at ease. They talked about the art world, about family, about everything and nothing at all. Aunt Claire had always been her anchor, the person who understood her better than anyone. As they ate, Claire looked at Lily with a thoughtful expression. "You know," Aunt Claire began, "I've been thinking a lot about your father, about everything he went through and the life he built. You're carrying on his legacy, Lily, but you're also creating something entirely new, something that's yours and only yours." Lily nodded, feeling the truth of her aunt's words resonate deeply. She had spent so long thinking that she needed to follow in her father's footsteps to make him proud. But now, she was learning that she didn't need to recreate the past. Her father had laid the foundation, and it was up to her to build something from it. "I think I'm finally ready to do that," Lily said, a sense of determination settling in her chest. "I've spent so long focusing on what he would want or what others expect of me. But now, I realize it's about my own path. And that path might look different, but that's okay." Her aunt smiled warmly, a knowing look in her eyes. "I've always believed in you, Lily. You've got this." The next day, Lily received a call from the same gallery in New York that had featured her first exhibition. They were eager to host her next show, but this time, they didn't just want her to display her work. They wanted her to share her story. They wanted to showcase the evolution of her art and the themes of healing, identity, and transformation that had shaped her latest series. At first, Lily felt a sense of hesitation. This new series was deeply personal, raw, and vulnerable. Would people understand it? Would they connect with it the way they had with her earlier work? But then she remembered the promise she had made to herself, to create art that was true to who she was, not who others wanted her to be. "I'll do it," Lily said, determination in her voice. "It's time to share my story." The exhibition, which would be her second solo show, became a turning point in her career. This time, she wasn't just sharing her art. She was sharing herself, her healing, her growth, and her acceptance of both the light and the darkness within her. Her photographs, intertwined with her paintings, spoke to the complexity of the human experience: loss, love, self-discovery, and rebirth. The opening night of the exhibition was a quiet affair compared to the first one. There were fewer crowds, but the energy was different. People who had been drawn in by her earlier work now saw the deeper layers of her journey. The critics praised the rawness of the pieces, the vulnerability, and the courage it took to share such an intimate part of herself. As Lily walked through the gallery, a sense of pride filled her chest. She wasn't just Keanu Reeves' daughter anymore. She was Lily, an artist in her own right, with a unique story to tell and a voice that was finally being heard. At the end of the night, she found herself standing alone in front of one of the most powerful pieces in the collection. A large painting of the ocean, dark and tumultuous, but with a single beam of light breaking through the clouds, illuminating the waves below. The piece captured her journey perfectly: the struggle, the uncertainty, and the quiet hope that had always existed, even in the darkest of times. As she stared at the painting, Lily realized that this was only the beginning. There was so much more to explore, so many more stories to tell. But now, she knew that she was on her own path, and nothing could stop her. Her father's love had guided her here, but it was her own heart that would lead the way forward. In the weeks following the exhibition, Lily found herself more in tune with her work than she had ever been. The response to her new series had been overwhelmingly positive. The critics, her friends, and even strangers who had come across her art all seemed to connect with the raw honesty and vulnerability in her pieces. It was as if the pieces were not just photographs or paintings, but windows into her very soul. She felt a sense of freedom she hadn't known before. She was no longer creating for anyone other than herself. But with this newfound freedom came a challenge: the need to truly let go of the past, to stop holding on to things that no longer served her. One chilly evening, Lily was working late in her studio, the familiar hum of her thoughts as she adjusted a canvas in front of her. Her studio was bathed in the warm glow of a single desk lamp, the rest of the room dark except for the scattered art supplies and half-finished projects that had piled up. The sound of a doorbell echoed through the empty hallway, and Lily looked up, momentarily startled by the interruption. She wiped the paint off her hands and walked toward the door. When she opened it, she found her aunt standing there once again, her arms folded in a knowing embrace. "Got a minute?" Aunt Claire asked, her tone soft but firm. Lily nodded and stepped aside to let her in, wondering what was on her aunt's mind this time. It had been a while since they'd had one of their heart-to-heart conversations, and Lily had grown to cherish those moments of real connection. Claire walked over to the small kitchen area, where a cup of tea was already prepared, and handed it to Lily. "You've been working nonstop. What's going on, Lil?" Lily sat down at the table, taking a sip of the warm tea. She'd been so focused on her art that she hadn't even realized how much time had passed. "I guess I've just been feeling stuck. I'm afraid that if I slow down, I'll lose the momentum I've built. Everyone seems to expect more from me now that I've shared this new work." Aunt Claire sat down across from her, studying her with a mixture of concern and understanding. "What about you, Lily? What do you expect from yourself? Is this what you want, or is it just what you think others want you to do?" The question hit Lily harder than she expected. She'd spent so much time trying to prove herself to the world, to show that she could live up to her father's legacy, that she hadn't stopped to think about whether she was following her own heart. She hadn't questioned the choices she had made or the path she was on. She had just kept moving, like a machine, unsure if the destination even mattered anymore. I guess I don't know anymore, Lily admitted, the weight of her uncertainty settling over her. I don't know if I'm doing this for me or for everyone else. I've been so caught up in the expectations and the need to keep creating, to keep pushing forward. I'm afraid that if I stop, if I let go of all this, I'll lose who I am. Or worse, I'll forget why I started this journey in the first place. Aunt Claire smiled gently, her eyes filled with the wisdom of someone who had walked through her own struggles in life. You're allowed to take a break, Lily. You're allowed to slow down. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. You need to prove it to yourself that you can let go, that you can trust yourself, and that you're not defined by the work you produce or the expectations you carry. Lily felt the tension in her chest begin to loosen, as if a weight had been lifted. She realized that she had been holding onto her art like a lifeline, afraid that without it, she would be nothing. But her aunt was right. She didn't need to keep proving herself. She needed to give herself the permission to just be, to experience life without the pressure to create or to live up to anyone else's idea of success. I've been so afraid of letting go, Lily said quietly, afraid that if I stopped, everything would fall apart. You're not going to fall apart, sweetheart, Aunt Claire reassured her. Letting go isn't the same as giving up. It's about making space for something new, for growth, for change. You don't have to keep running on empty. Lily took a deep breath, allowing the truth of her aunt's words to sink in. She hadn't realized just how much pressure she had been placing on herself, how much she had been trying to keep up appearances. The truth was, she had been afraid of what might happen if she stopped, if she let herself breathe and just live. But maybe that was exactly what she needed. Maybe it was time to let go of the fear of failure and embrace the unknown. Okay, Lily said, her voice barely above a whisper. I think I'm ready to try letting go, to stop trying so hard to be everything for everyone. Aunt Claire smiled warmly. Good. It's about time. The following days were a slow but necessary process of introspection for Lily. She decided to step back from her work, even if just for a little while. Instead of locking herself in her studio every day, she began to focus on other parts of her life, spending more time with friends, walking through the city, reading books she had put off for years. She even started cooking meals again, something she had once loved but had neglected in favor of her art. Little by little, she began to feel a sense of peace returning to her heart, as if she was rediscovering parts of herself that had long been dormant. As the weeks passed, Lily started to realize that life wasn't about being constantly productive or trying to live up to anyone's expectations. It was about balance, about finding joy in the simple moments. She didn't need to constantly create in order to feel fulfilled. She could live, breathe, and exist, and in doing so, she would find the inspiration she needed when the time was right. One afternoon, while walking through a quiet park, Lily came across a small group of children playing. Their laughter echoed in the air, bright and full of life. Lily smiled to herself, feeling the warmth of their joy wrap around her like a comforting blanket. It was a reminder that the world was full of moments like this, fleeting, beautiful, and full of potential. In that moment, Lily understood something crucial. She didn't need to hold on so tightly, letting go of the need for perfection, for constant achievement, for the pressure to be someone she wasn't. It was all part of the process. Letting go was not weakness, it was strength. And it was in this strength that she would find her truest self. The rest of the year unfolded at a pace she had never known before. Lily took things one day at a time, allowing herself to explore her passions, reconnect with the people she loved, and focus on the things that truly brought her joy. And when she was ready, she would pick up her camera again, not out of obligation, but because she was inspired. Her father's words echoed in her mind. You are enough, just as you are. And for the first time, Lily truly believed it. She was enough. Not because of her art, not because of her success, but because of the woman she was becoming. And as she stood at the edge of the ocean once more, watching the waves crash against the shore, she finally felt at peace. The art of letting go had opened the door to a new chapter, one where she could create freely, live fully, and, above all, love herself exactly as she was. As the months passed, Lily began to realize just how far she had come. The intense pressure she had once placed on herself had slowly melted away, replaced by a quieter, more fulfilling sense of purpose. She had found joy in the simplicity of everyday life, and for the first time in a long while, she felt like she was truly living, not just existing. But despite the peace she had found, a nagging feeling lingered in the back of her mind. The desire to fully honor her father's memory, but also to carve out a legacy that was her own. One morning, as Lily sat with a cup of tea in her favorite armchair, she was startled by the sound of her phone ringing. It was an unfamiliar number, and for a moment, she hesitated before answering. "Hello," she said, her voice still groggy from just waking up. "Lily? It's Michael," from the gallery, came the familiar voice on the other end. "I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." Lily sat up straighter, instantly awake. Michael was the curator from the New York gallery that had hosted her last exhibition. He had been instrumental in helping her build connections in the art world, and she had grown to respect him over the years. "No, not at all," Lily replied. "What's going on?" "I wanted to touch base with you about something," Michael said, his tone warm and professional. "There's an opportunity coming up for a special project. It's a collaboration with a few other artists, and we think you'd be a perfect fit." Lily felt her heart skip a beat. A collaboration? She had never done something like that before. The idea of working alongside other artists, sharing ideas and experiences, was both exciting and intimidating. "I'm intrigued," Lily said, her voice betraying her curiosity. "What's the project about?" Michael went on to explain that the project was centered around exploring themes of family and legacy, with each artist creating a piece that connected to their personal history. They would be asked to reflect on how their background and the people who had influenced them had shaped their art. The goal was to create an exhibition that celebrated both the individual and the collective experience of heritage, memory, and legacy. Lily was silent for a moment, processing the information. The theme of legacy immediately struck a chord with her. It felt like the perfect opportunity to finally address the complexity of her relationship with her father, to honor him in a way that felt right for her. "I'm interested," she said finally, her voice steady. "I think this is something I'd like to do." Michael sounded pleased. "Great. I'll send you the details, and we'll schedule a meeting soon to discuss everything in more depth. I'm looking forward to seeing what you come up with." After the call ended, Lily sat still for a moment, the weight of what she had just agreed to settling over her. She was going to create a piece that not only represented her art, but also explored her father's influence on her life. It felt like the perfect moment to connect her past and her present, to weave together the strands of her identity into something truly meaningful. But as the excitement grew, so did a quiet undercurrent of fear. What if she couldn't do justice to her father's legacy? What if her work wasn't enough? For so long, she had been afraid of failing to live up to his memory, of not being able to step out from the shadow of his success. This project would require her to confront those fears head-on. Over the next few weeks, Lily threw herself into the project. She spent countless hours reflecting on her father's life, his influence on her, and the ways in which their relationship had shaped her. She began working on sketches, jotting down ideas, and gathering materials for her piece. But no matter how much effort she put in, a sense of self-doubt lingered. Every time she picked up her brush or her camera, she wondered if it was enough, if it could truly honor her father's legacy without overshadowing her own voice. One evening, after a particularly long day of work, Lily found herself sitting in front of the unfinished canvas, staring at the swirling strokes of paint that seemed to have no direction. She was exhausted, both physically and emotionally, and she knew she needed a break. She put her brush down and stood up, walking over to the window. The city outside was bathed in the soft glow of the setting sun, and the view always gave her a sense of calm. Her phone buzzed, pulling her out of her thoughts. It was a message from Aunt Claire. "How's the project going, Lil? You know, you don't have to do it all at once. It's about the process, not the product. You've got this." Lily smiled at the message, but the truth was, she didn't feel like she had it all together. She had always been her own toughest critic, and the pressure to create something meaningful was weighing heavily on her. But her aunt's words gave her a little spark of hope. The next day, Lily made the decision to step away from the project for a while. She took a walk to the park, allowing herself to breathe, to think, and to let go of the constant pressure to produce. As she walked among the trees, she thought about her father. Not the artist, not the public figure, but the man who had loved her with such depth. She thought about their quiet mornings together, their conversations about art, about life, and about everything in between. In those moments, it wasn't about perfection. It was about connection. It was about love. By the time she returned home, a sense of calm had settled over her. The pressure, the self-doubt, had softened. She realized that her father's legacy wasn't something she had to live up to. It was something she carried with her, not as a burden, but as a source of strength and inspiration. And she was ready to honor it, in her own way, on her own terms. The days that followed were filled with new clarity. Lily began to approach the project with a sense of freedom. She allowed herself to explore different mediums, combining photographs, painting, and even video footage that she had taken during her travels. She wanted to capture the essence of her relationship with her father, the ways in which their shared experiences had shaped her art and her understanding of the world. The piece she ultimately created was an intricate, multi-layered work that depicted moments from her childhood intertwined with imagery of the ocean, the one place where she had always felt closest to her father. The waves represented the ebb and flow of their relationship, the highs, the lows, the moments of silence, and the conversations that had shaped who she was. At the center of the piece was a photograph of her father, faded and worn, surrounded by fragments of her own artwork. The image was haunting and beautiful, capturing both the grief and the love that had defined her journey. When the time came to present her work at the gallery, Lily felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. She wasn't sure how people would respond, but as she stood in front of her piece during the opening night, she realized that it didn't matter. She had poured her heart into this project, and in doing so, she had allowed herself to truly honor her father, not through grand gestures, but through the quiet, intimate act of creating something that was a reflection of her truth. The response was powerful. Visitors were drawn to the emotional depth of her work, the way it captured not only her father's influence on her, but also the complexities of their bond. It was a piece that spoke to love, loss, and the enduring connection between generations. And for Lily, it was a reminder that her own journey was just as important as the legacy she carried with her. In that moment, standing among the people who had come to appreciate her art, Lily knew that she had finally found her voice, one that was both hers and her father's, shaped by love, struggle, and the quiet power of remembering. And as the night went on, she felt a sense of peace, knowing that she had created something that would carry her father's legacy forward, but also mark the beginning of her own. The gallery opening had been a success, more than Lily had anticipated. The positive feedback poured in, and the project she had contributed to had garnered significant attention. However, as satisfying as it was to see her art appreciated, Lily knew the real work had just begun. She had finally created something that felt like a true reflection of herself, but now she had to live with it, to carry it forward as part of her journey, rather than allowing it to define her completely. Despite the praise, Lily still found herself wrestling with the same fears that had haunted her in the past. She was proud of what she had done, but there was always a part of her wondering if she could do it again, if she could continue to produce art that was as raw and meaningful. It was the weight of expectation, not just from others, but from herself. She sat alone in her studio one evening, the silence broken only by the rhythmic ticking of the clock on the wall. The canvases around her felt like a reminder of all that had come before. The work, the projects, the unfinished pieces she had put aside. The art was still there, still waiting to be brought to life. But something was different now. She wasn't sure if she had the strength to keep pushing herself, to keep creating when the pressure felt like it was slowly suffocating her. That evening, Lily received a call from her aunt. "Hey, sweetie, how are you holding up?" Claire's voice was full of warmth, though there was a hint of concern underneath it. "I'm okay," Lily replied, but she knew her aunt could tell it wasn't the whole truth. "You don't sound okay," Claire said gently. "You've been working nonstop, haven't you? You need to give yourself a break." Lily sighed. "I don't know if I can. I'm scared, Aunt Claire. What if I can't do it again? What if I'm just a one-hit wonder? What if I've already shown everything I have to offer?" Claire was silent for a moment, as though considering the weight of Lily's words. Then, she spoke in the calm tone that Lily had come to rely on over the years. "You're afraid of what's next, aren't you? You've given so much of yourself, and now that you've achieved something significant, you don't know if you can do it again. But here's the thing, Lil. True strength comes from vulnerability. It comes from letting yourself feel what you're feeling, even if that means admitting that you're scared. And it's okay to be scared. It's okay to take a step back when you need it. But just don't give up on yourself." Lily felt a lump form in her throat as she listened to her aunt's words. It was the truth she didn't want to admit, but she knew it was the only way forward. She had been pushing herself for so long, trying to prove her worth not just to the world, but to herself. But maybe, just maybe, it was time to let go of that burden. After the call ended, Lily sat in her studio for a long time, thinking. The room was quiet except for the sound of her breathing and the soft rustle of the papers scattered around her. She had poured so much of her heart into her last project, and she had feared that by letting go of the pressure to keep creating, she would lose herself. But now, as the weight of her aunt's words settled in, she realized that she had been holding onto the wrong idea of strength. Strength wasn't about constantly pushing forward, never stopping, never questioning. It was about understanding when to take a step back, to breathe, and to find clarity again. It was then that Lily made a decision, one that would not only change the course of her art, but would change her approach to life itself. The next few days were a quiet revolution. Lily didn't pick up a paintbrush or a camera. Instead, she allowed herself time to just be. She went on long walks through the park, spent time with friends, and took a weekend trip to a quiet cabin by the mountains, something she hadn't done in years. She read books that had nothing to do with art, watched movies that made her laugh, and spent hours sitting by the fireplace, letting her mind wander. Slowly, the heaviness began to lift. It was in this quiet space that Lily realized something important. Her art had always been a reflection of her life, a way to process the chaos, the joy, the pain, and the beauty that she experienced. But it didn't have to define her. She didn't need to force herself to create in every moment of her life. Sometimes, living was enough. And when the time came to create again, it would come naturally. On one of those quiet mornings, as the sun rose over the mountains, Lily sat on the porch with a cup of coffee in her hands, gazing out at the expansive view before her. The stillness was a welcome contrast to the noise of the city, and for the first time in a long time, she felt at peace. It was there, in that moment of solitude, that the inspiration she had been waiting for struck her. It wasn't a big revelation or a sudden burst of creative genius. It was a quiet knowing, a realization that the strength she had been searching for was already within her. She didn't need to prove anything to anyone. She only needed to listen to herself, trust herself, and let her heart lead the way. When Lily returned to the city, she didn't rush back to her studio. Instead, she took the time to reconnect with the people who had been there for her along the way. Her friends, her aunt, and even those who had supported her art from the very beginning. She wanted to remember what it felt like to be in the world without the pressure to perform, to produce, to be anything other than who she was. As the days turned into weeks, Lily gradually began to ease back into her work, but with a new perspective. The anxiety and fear she once had about her art began to fade as she allowed herself to be more playful, more experimental with her approach. No longer tethered to the need for perfection, she allowed the art to flow through her, knowing that it didn't need to be an outward display of strength. It could simply be an expression of herself. And when the time came to unveil her new work, Lily was ready. The pieces she had created were not perfect. They were raw, unpolished, and beautiful in their imperfection. But they were hers. They were a reflection of the journey she had been on, the lessons she had learned, and the strength she had found in letting go. At her new exhibition, friends and strangers alike were drawn to her work. They saw the vulnerability, the honesty, and the emotional depth in each piece. And for Lily, that was enough. She no longer needed the validation of others to feel fulfilled. She had found her peace, her voice, and her strength, not through constant effort, but through knowing when to pause, reflect, and embrace the quiet moments of life. As the exhibition came to a close, Lily stood by her work, watching people interact with her pieces. For the first time in a long time, she smiled, knowing that this was just the beginning of a new chapter. She was ready for whatever came next, knowing that she had already done the most important thing. She had learned to trust herself, and with that, Lily felt the weight of her doubts lift entirely. She was no longer chasing the past, nor was she afraid of what the future held. She was simply living, creating when it felt right, and embracing the beauty of the present. The months that followed Lily's exhibition were filled with a newfound sense of purpose, a quiet but firm determination to continue her journey, wherever it led. Her art had become more than just a career. It was now a way for her to understand herself, to communicate the complexities of her emotions, and to connect with others on a deeper level. She found that the more she embraced her own vulnerability, the more people responded to her work. It wasn't about perfection. It was about authenticity. One bright spring afternoon, Lily was sitting in her studio, reviewing some sketches for an upcoming project. The sun streamed through the windows, casting a warm glow on the room. It had been a year since her father's passing, and though the grief never truly left her, it had softened, becoming part of her, woven into the fabric of her life rather than something that held her back. She had learned to carry his memory with her, not as a burden, but as a guiding light. Lily was interrupted by a knock on the door. She looked up to see Michael, the curator from the gallery, standing in the doorway with a grin on his face. "Hey, stranger," he greeted her. "Got a minute?" Lily smiled and stood up, walking over to greet him. "Of course. What brings you by?" Michael's eyes gleamed with excitement. "I have some news. A big opportunity for you." Lily's eyebrows furrowed. Her curiosity piqued. What kind of opportunity? He leaned against the doorframe, crossing his arms. "Remember that special project I told you about a while back? The one about family and legacy? Well, it's happening again. But this time, the stakes are higher. The theme is full circle. We want you to lead the project. You'll be curating a whole exhibit around the idea of how art, memory, and time shape our identities." Lily was taken aback. Lead the project? It was a huge responsibility. She had never considered herself a curator, but the idea of putting together a collection that explored the passage of time, the cycles of life, and the people who shaped her, it felt like the perfect challenge. It felt like a way to bring everything she had learned about herself, her art, and her father into a single, cohesive vision. "I'm honored," she said, her voice soft but firm. "But it's a huge undertaking. Are you sure I'm the right person for this?" Michael's smile widened. "You're more than ready, Lily. You've already proven you can turn personal experiences into something universally relatable. This project is about giving artists the chance to tell their stories, just like you've done. You've got the perfect vision for it." Lily took a deep breath, considering his words. A part of her hesitated. The fear of not being enough, of taking on something so monumental, still lingered. But there was also a voice inside her that told her this was the right path. She had come full circle, and now it was time to step into a leadership role. "All right," she said finally, her decision made. "Let's do it." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of meetings, brainstorming sessions, and creative exchanges as Lily began to gather the artists who would contribute to the exhibition. It was a delicate process, choosing individuals whose work would complement each other while still allowing their unique voices to shine. Each artist had their own story, their own experience of how time, memory, and legacy had shaped their art. As Lily spoke with each one, she found herself immersed in their journeys, inspired by the parallels between their lives and her own. Despite the challenges that came with curating such a diverse collection, Lily felt a deep sense of satisfaction. She was no longer merely an observer in the art world. She was now a creator of space, a connector of voices, and in the process, she realized that this was her true calling, not just to create her own art, but to create opportunities for others to share their stories. One afternoon, after finalizing the lineup of artists, Lily stood in the empty gallery space, envisioning how everything would come together. The walls would be lined with pieces that told stories of families, of legacies passed down through generations, of moments captured in time and memory. It was going to be a tribute to the beauty of life's cycles, the way every ending carried with it the seed of a new beginning. As she stood there, taking it all in. A sense of peace washed over her. She had come so far from the place of fear and self-doubt that had once defined her. She had found her voice, not just through her art, but through the way she had embraced the process of living, of learning, growing, and sharing. And now, she was giving others the space to do the same. The exhibition, titled Full Circle, opened on a warm summer evening. The gallery was packed with people, fellow artists, collectors, critics, and art lovers, all eager to see the culmination of Lily's vision. As the crowd mingled, discussing the works on display, Lily stood quietly in the background, observing the way her curated pieces resonated with the audience. There were moments of awe, of recognition, as people stopped in front of specific works, moved by the raw emotion and stories embedded in the art. Some lingered longer than others, drawn in by the connection between the artist's history and their present. The power of memory, of family, and of time was evident in each piece, and the entire exhibition felt like a conversation, one that spanned generations and bridged the gap between personal experience and collective understanding. Lily stood near the central piece of the exhibit, a multi-dimensional installation that she had created herself. It was a representation of her own journey, the way her relationship with her father had shaped her as an artist and as a person. At the heart of the installation was a mirrored frame, reflecting not just the viewer's image, but the subtle, layered patterns of time and memory. It was both a personal exploration and a universal experience, a reminder that our stories are always unfolding, always in motion. As she watched people interact with the piece, something inside her clicked. She didn't need to hold on to the fear of not being enough. She had already given all that she could, and in return, she had created something that was both hers and theirs. This was the power of art, of connection, of memory, of sharing. It was never about perfection. It was about truth. At the end of the evening, as the gallery began to empty and the last of the guests filtered out into the night, Lily stood alone in the space, her heart full. She had done it. She had curated not just an exhibition, but a celebration of life, of its many circles, its transitions, its rhythms. And in doing so, she had created a space where both she and the artist she had brought together could breathe, share, and grow. As the lights dimmed and the doors closed, Lily took a deep breath, feeling a profound sense of accomplishment. She had come full circle, from a daughter struggling to find her own identity to a leader guiding others on their journey. And as she walked out of the gallery, a quiet smile played at the corners of her lips. This was just the beginning. Her father's legacy had shaped her path, but now it was her own story, her own art, and her own future that awaited. And she was ready to face it head-on. Lily spent the following months reflecting on everything that had happened since she first stepped into the world of art. She had come a long way since her father's death. Her work had evolved, and so had her understanding of herself and the world around her. The Full Circle exhibition had been a turning point, not just in her career, but in her journey of healing and self-discovery. Yet, despite all her success, Lily couldn't escape the feeling that something was still missing. It wasn't the lack of recognition or even the fear of failure that haunted her. It was the weight of legacy. She had spent so much time grappling with her father's memory and how it defined her, but now, as her work grew in stature, she was beginning to wonder if it was possible to break free from it entirely. As much as she loved her father and the impact his influence had on her life, there were moments when it felt like she was still living in his shadow. She had proven herself as an artist, yes, but could she ever be truly free of the constant comparisons? Would her identity as an artist always be tied to the man who had shaped her? And if so, what did that mean for her future? One rainy afternoon, Lily found herself once again sitting in the studio, surrounded by unfinished works, waiting for the spark of inspiration to strike. Her phone buzzed on the table, and when she picked it up, she saw a message from her Aunt Claire. "Hi, sweetie. How's everything going? I was thinking about you today. I know it's been a while since we talked. Let's catch up soon." Lily smiled softly at the message. Claire had always been her anchor, the person who kept her grounded when everything around her felt like it was spinning out of control. She had always been there for Lily, offering words of wisdom when needed most. Claire's voice had a way of cutting through the noise of self-doubt, reminding Lily of her worth beyond her accomplishments. After a few moments of hesitation, Lily typed a response. I've been thinking a lot about Dad lately, and about everything that's happened since, sometimes it feels like I can't escape it. His memory, his legacy. It's like it's always there, lurking behind everything I do. The message sat there for a while before Lily hit send. She wasn't sure what she expected, but she knew that she needed to talk about it. A few minutes later, Claire's response came through. I get it, honey. I've been thinking about him, too. And I know it's hard, especially when you're trying to make your own mark. But you need to remember, your dad's legacy isn't just about what he did. It's about what you do with it, what you create from it. You're not his shadow, Lily. You're his continuation. Lily stared at the screen for a moment, her chest tight. It wasn't the first time Claire had said something like this, but the weight of her words hit harder now. What if Claire was right? What if, by holding onto her father's memory so tightly, she was limiting herself? The idea gnawed at her for the rest of the evening. Could she truly step out from under his shadow? Could she build her own legacy, separate from the man who had shaped everything she knew about art? The next morning, after a restless night of thought, Lily made a decision. She was going to embark on a new project, something that had nothing to do with her father, something entirely her own. It was time to explore what she wanted to say, not just as his daughter, but as an artist in her own right. Lily spent the following weeks researching and experimenting, diving into new techniques and mediums that pushed her beyond her comfort zone. She painted in ways she had never tried before. Abstract, surreal, spontaneous. She began to play with concepts that had always intrigued her but had felt too risky to explore in the past. The work was raw, intense, and deeply personal, but it was also freeing. Each piece felt like a small rebellion against the limitations she had placed on herself. One day, as she sat back to admire the progress she had made, Lily realized something important. This new project wasn't about trying to forget her father's influence. It was about embracing her own path and acknowledging that her journey was not just a reflection of him, but a continuation of everything he had taught her about the power of art. He had shown her how to see the world through an artist's eyes, but it was up to her to define how that vision would take shape. The more she worked, the more confident she became. She wasn't trying to escape her father's legacy. She was evolving it. Every brushstroke, every line she drew was a testament to the lessons he had taught her, but it was also a reflection of who she had become. A few months later, after much anticipation, Lily's new exhibition, titled Beyond the Legacy, was ready to be unveiled. The pieces were unlike anything she had created before. They were bold, experimental, and deeply emotional. The gallery was filled with vibrant colors and distorted shapes, capturing the chaos, beauty, and vulnerability of her internal world. The opening night was a success, but what stood out to Lily most was the way people responded to the work. They saw her, not her father, not her past, but her. For the first time in a long time, Lily felt like she had fully stepped into her own as an artist. The audience wasn't just admiring her work out of respect for her lineage. They were drawn to her vision, her story, her truth. Lily moved through the gallery, observing the guests as they interacted with her pieces. It was strange, yet liberating, to witness their reactions. She had always been afraid that she couldn't be herself in the art world, that she had to conform to the expectations placed on her. But here, in this moment, she realized that the only expectation that mattered was the one she had set for herself. As the night wore on, Claire came up to her, beaming with pride. "You did it, sweetie," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "I knew you would. This is you." Lily smiled, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I think I finally believe it, Aunt Claire." In the months that followed, Beyond the Legacy toured galleries across the country, and Lily's reputation as an artist began to soar. She was no longer seen as just Keanu Reeves' daughter. She was Lily Reeves, a talented, innovative artist in her own right. The weight of legacy that had once felt like a heavy chain around her neck had finally become something she could carry with pride. And while her father's memory would always be with her, she had finally come to terms with it. She was no longer seeking his approval, nor was she trying to escape his shadow. Instead, She had found a way to honor him by building her own path, a path that was uniquely hers, filled with its own triumphs and challenges. Lily knew that her journey was far from over, but for the first time in a long time, she felt ready for whatever came next. Lily had come to realize that healing wasn't just about moving past pain or loss. It was about learning to live with it, integrating it into the person you were becoming. Her father's memory, once a heavy anchor that threatened to keep her grounded in the past, was now a part of the very fabric of her identity. It wasn't something she was trying to outrun anymore. Instead, it was something she learned to carry with strength and grace. But still, there was something elusive in her life, a piece of her story that she had yet to confront. Her relationship with love, with intimacy, had always been a complicated thing. She had poured so much of herself into her art, into the legacy of her father, that she had neglected her own emotional needs. Her romantic life had never been a priority, and while she had dated in the past, no relationship had ever seemed to last. Now, after her breakthroughs in art and her deepened connection with her own identity, Lily realized that she was ready to open herself up to love again. She wasn't looking for someone to fix her or to fill the void left by her father's death. She was looking for a partner, someone who could walk beside her as she continued to grow and evolve. It was on one of her trips to New York City for an art conference that Lily met Evan. She had attended the event with one of her closest friends, Sarah, another artist whose work focused on environmental activism. Evan was a well-known photographer in the art world, with a reputation for capturing raw, authentic moments. He was tall, with dark hair and kind eyes that seemed to see straight through to her soul. They struck up a conversation during a casual mixer in the lobby of the conference hotel, and Lily was immediately struck by how comfortable she felt around him. It was as though she had known him forever, even though they had just met. They spent the evening talking about everything and nothing: art, life, their dreams, their challenges. The conversation flowed so easily that Lily forgot about the time passing. There was a quiet understanding between them, as though their stories, though vastly different, had something in common. As the night drew to a close, Evan asked, "Would you like to grab coffee tomorrow? I'd love to continue this conversation." Lily hesitated for a moment. She had been so focused on her art and her personal journey that the thought of opening herself up to a new relationship seemed daunting. But something about Evan felt different. He wasn't just interested in her as an artist. He was genuinely interested in her as a person. "I'd like that," she said, smiling. The next morning, they met at a small cafe near the conference center. They sat for hours, talking about their lives, their passions, and their fears. Evan shared stories from his travels, his photography, and the people he had met along the way. Lily told him about her work, her struggles with identity, and her journey to becoming the artist she was today. As the days passed, they continued to meet, discovering new layers to each other's lives. Evan was gentle, patient, and encouraging, never pushing her beyond what she was ready to share. He didn't try to fix her or offer solutions to her struggles. He just listened, and in that listening, he made her feel seen. It wasn't long before their connection deepened into something more. They began to date, slowly at first, but with an undeniable pull that neither of them could ignore. Lily found herself opening up in ways she hadn't thought possible. With Evan, she didn't feel like she had to be perfect. She could be vulnerable, and that vulnerability was met with kindness and acceptance. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she could have both the love and the freedom she had longed for. But, like any relationship, it wasn't without its challenges. As Lily became more immersed in her career and Evan with his photography, they found themselves balancing their time between personal and professional lives. It was a dance, and sometimes they stepped on each other's toes. There were misunderstandings, moments of doubt, and the occasional argument, things that seemed trivial but felt significant in the moment. One afternoon, after a particularly heated discussion about their differing career priorities, Lily sat alone in her studio, feeling the weight of everything. She wondered if she was overextending herself, trying to juggle her personal and professional life. She loved Evan, but she also loved her art, and sometimes she wasn't sure how to reconcile the two. Was it possible to have both, to pursue her passion while being fully present in her relationship? It was then that she realized something important. love wasn't just about the good moments. It was about learning to navigate the difficult ones, the moments of uncertainty and discomfort. Love was about growth, not just as an individual, but as a couple. It wasn't about perfection. It was about creating something beautiful despite the cracks and flaws. A few weeks later, Lily and Evan found themselves sitting at the same cafe where they had first met. It had become a regular spot for them, a place where they could escape from the world and just be with each other. "Can I tell you something?" Lily asked, her voice softer than usual. "Of course," Evan replied, looking up from his coffee. "I've been thinking a lot about us," she said, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. "I've realized that I've been afraid that I'm not enough, that I'll lose myself in this. But I don't think that's true anymore." Evan smiled, reaching across the table to take her hand. "You're more than enough, Lily. I never want you to lose yourself. I want to be a part of your journey, not take you off course." Lily looked at him, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. This, what they had, wasn't just about two people coming together. It was about two individuals supporting each other as they each worked toward their own growth. With Evan by her side, Lily knew she could continue to evolve as an artist, as a person. She didn't have to choose between love and her career. She could have both, in ways that complemented each other. As the months passed, Lily and Evan's relationship flourished. Their shared experiences, both good and bad, had strengthened their bond. Lily found herself more grounded, more connected to the world around her. She had learned that love, like art, was a process, a messy, beautiful, evolving process that required patience, vulnerability, and trust. Lily's art continued to evolve as well. She pushed herself further, exploring new themes and styles, and her work began to receive recognition not just in the art community but also in mainstream media. She had found her voice, and now it was impossible to ignore. And as for her father's legacy, it was still there, but it no longer defined her. She had learned to live with it, to honor it without letting it control her every decision. She was Lily Reeves, an artist in her own right, and she was ready for whatever the future held. Her journey had taken many twists and turns, but she had come to understand something fundamental. The most important thing was not where she had been, but where she was going. And with Evan by her side, the future was full of endless possibilities. Lily's journey of self-discovery had been long and challenging, but with each step, she had learned more about herself and her place in the world. The art world, once a daunting arena of high expectations, had become a space of expression and freedom. And, more importantly, she had found love. A love that didn't ask her to sacrifice her ambitions but supported and encouraged them. It was a love that was rooted in mutual respect and understanding. One that allowed both her and Evan to grow as individuals while growing together as a couple. Yet, despite all the progress she had made, there was still an underlying question that lingered in her mind. What came next? What did the future hold for her, and how could she continue to evolve both personally and professionally? One day, as she sat in her studio, staring at a blank canvas, Lily's mind drifted to the notion of the next step. She had pushed herself creatively, had overcome personal obstacles, and had embraced her love for Evan. But she had never considered where her career might go from here. What kind of legacy she wanted to leave behind, not just as an artist, but as a person. Evan, who had been working on his latest photography project, could sense that something was on Lily's mind. He had always been perceptive to her moods, noticing when she was consumed by a thought, when something was weighing on her heart. "Hey," he said softly, setting down his camera and walking toward her. "What's going on in that head of yours?" Lily smiled, though her expression held a touch of uncertainty. "I've been thinking. I've reached a point in my career where I feel like I'm ready for something new, something bigger." Evan raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What do you mean by bigger?" "I'm not sure yet," she replied, her voice thoughtful, "but I think it's time to explore new horizons. I want to make an impact beyond just the art world. I want my work to connect with people in a deeper way, to leave a mark that resonates with more than just those who come to galleries." Evan nodded, understanding where she was coming from. "I get it. You've always pushed boundaries with your art. I think you're ready for that next step. What do you have in mind?" Lily paused, searching for the right words. I've been toying with the idea of creating an immersive experience, something that combines art, technology, and storytelling. An installation that not only engages people visually but emotionally, too. A space where people can step into the narrative, feel it, live it. Something that blurs the lines between the observer and the experience. Evan's eyes lit up with excitement. That sounds incredible. It's exactly the kind of thing that could shift how people view art. You've always been about pushing boundaries, and this would definitely do that. Lily felt a spark of excitement deep within her. She had always wanted to create something more than just a series of paintings on a wall. She wanted to create an experience, a living, breathing piece of art that would leave a lasting impression on everyone who entered it. But the idea also came with its own set of challenges. She didn't have the technical knowledge to bring this vision to life, and creating an immersive experience would require resources, collaboration, and a level of risk she hadn't yet taken. For the first time in a while, Lily felt both exhilarated and anxious. She knew that this was the next step in her evolution as an artist, but it was also a leap into the unknown. Over the next few weeks, Lily immersed herself in research. She connected with architects, technologists, and designers who had worked on large-scale art installations and immersive experiences. She pored over case studies, attended workshops, and consulted with experts who could help her turn her vision into reality. As she delved deeper into the technical side of things, she realized just how much she didn't know. There were times when she felt overwhelmed, unsure of how to make her ideas come to life. But every time she hit a roadblock, she reminded herself that growth was a process, and this was part of it. Evan, ever supportive, encouraged her through the challenges. He often joined her in brainstorming sessions, offering insights from his own experience in the creative world. His feedback was invaluable, and his belief in her helped her push through moments of doubt. Eventually, after months of planning, design, and collaboration, Lily's vision began to take shape. The immersive installation, titled Echoes of the Soul, would combine elements of visual art, sound, and interactive technology to create an environment where visitors could walk through and become a part of the artwork. Each room would represent a different aspect of the human experience: love, loss, joy, pain, and transformation. The narrative would be told through both visual imagery and immersive soundscapes, allowing visitors to connect with the artwork on a deeply emotional level. As the opening day approached, Lily felt a mix of excitement and fear. This was unlike anything she had ever done before, and she couldn't shake the feeling that the stakes were higher than ever. But she also knew that this was her moment, her chance to make a statement, to push herself beyond what she had ever imagined. The night before the grand opening, Lily and Evan stood together in the space, now fully transformed into the immersive environment they had worked so hard to create. The lights dimmed, and soft music filled the air. The rooms were filled with images that flickered and danced on the walls, shadows and colors that changed as you moved through the space. It was breathtaking. Lily looked around, feeling both proud and vulnerable. This was her work, a piece of herself given form, not just on a canvas, but in a way that people could experience with all their senses. Evan turned to her, taking her hand. "You've done it," he said, his voice filled with admiration. "This is incredible." Lily smiled, her eyes brimming with tears. "It's not just me. It's all of us. Every person who's helped bring this vision to life. I couldn't have done it without you." As the doors opened to the public the next day, the response was overwhelming. People walked through the space, eyes wide with awe, whispering to each other about the emotions the installation evoked. Some were moved to tears, others stood in silence, lost in the experience. The immersive art didn't just showcase Lily's talent. It connected people to their own emotions, their own experiences. The exhibition was a success in ways Lily hadn't imagined. It wasn't just her art that made an impact. It was the way it made people feel. She had created something that transcended the traditional boundaries of art. It was a living, breathing experience that brought people together in a shared emotional journey. In the months that followed, Echoes of the Soul was exhibited in several cities around the world. The feedback was incredible, and Lily's name became synonymous with innovative, immersive art. She had taken a leap of faith, one that had required vulnerability, risk, and hard work, but it had paid off in ways she hadn't expected. As for Lily herself, she had found a new sense of purpose. She wasn't just an artist anymore. She was a storyteller, a creator of experiences. She had found a way to make her art more than just something to be observed. It was something to be lived. And in the midst of all the success, she realized something important. The journey wasn't just about achieving success or creating the next big thing. It was about living authentically, embracing growth, and creating work that resonated with others on a deep, human level. With Evan by her side and the world at her feet, Lily knew that the future held endless possibilities. This was just the beginning of a new chapter, one that would continue to evolve as she did, always pushing the boundaries of what it meant to be an artist, a lover, and a person. As the buzz from Echoes of the Soul continued to grow, so did the expectations that came with it. Lily's innovative approach to art had catapulted her into the spotlight, and with that came both accolades and pressure. The media clamored for her attention, eager to hear about her next project. Galleries and art institutions across the globe sought her collaboration, hoping to bring her visionary work into their spaces. At first, Lily reveled in the success. She loved the recognition, the sense that her work was being seen by a wider audience, and the fact that people were connecting with her art on a deep level. But as the demands on her time and energy grew, so did the weight of it all. She began to feel like she was being pulled in every direction, struggling to maintain a balance between her work, her personal life, and the overwhelming expectations of the public. Evan, who had always been her steady source of support, noticed the change. Lily had become distant, less focused on their time together, more consumed by the constant whirlwind of art shows, interviews, and social media updates. He could see that she was tired, that the constant pressure was starting to chip away at her joy. One evening, after another hectic day filled with back-to-back meetings and press conferences, they sat together in their apartment, the silence between them thick with unspoken words. Lily absent-mindedly scrolled through her phone, her mind clearly elsewhere. Evan watched her for a moment before gently setting down his own phone. "Lily, talk to me," he said softly, his voice breaking the silence. "You've been distant lately. I feel like you're disappearing into all this. I miss us." Lily glanced up at him, the exhaustion in her eyes evident. "I know, Evan. I'm just overwhelmed. There's so much happening right now, and I feel like I'm expected to keep up with it all. I can't even remember the last time I had a moment to just breathe." Evan leaned forward, concern etching his face. "You don't have to do it all. You don't have to keep up with anyone's expectations except your own. You're an artist, Lily, not a machine." The words hit her like a wave, and for a moment, she simply sat in silence, absorbing what he had said. She had been so focused on proving herself, on meeting the standards the world had set for her, that she had lost sight of why she had started creating in the first place. It wasn't for the accolades or the praise. It was for the joy of expressing herself, of connecting with others through her work. Somewhere along the way, she had lost that joy, replaced by the pressure to constantly do more, be more. "I've forgotten what it feels like to just create for myself," she confessed quietly, her voice breaking. "I'm so focused on the next big thing, the next project, that I'm not even enjoying the process anymore." Evan reached across the table, gently taking her hand in his. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone, Lily. Your art is already enough. You are already enough. Just remember why you started this journey. That's all that matters." Tears welled in Lily's eyes as the weight of his words sank in. She had always been driven by a desire to make her father proud, to carve out her own identity as an artist, and to create work that would leave a lasting impact. But somewhere along the way, she had lost sight of the joy that had originally fueled her passion. "I don't want to lose myself in all of this," Lily whispered. "I don't want to forget what really matters." Evan smiled softly, squeezing her hand. "You won't. You've already done more than most could ever dream of. Just take a step back, breathe, and remember that you're allowed to create for the sake of creating. You don't have to carry the weight of everyone's expectations." That night, Lily made a decision. She was going to take some time for herself. She would step away from the whirlwind of her career for a little while. No interviews, no press events, no deadlines. Just her and her art, the way it had always been before the world had begun to take notice. The following week, Lily secluded herself in her studio, reclaiming the space as a sanctuary. She turned off her phone, closed the door to the outside world, and allowed herself the freedom to simply create without the pressure of anyone's expectations. It was as if the weight had lifted, and she was able to breathe again. She spent the days sketching, painting, and exploring new ideas that had been bubbling in her mind but had been suppressed by the demands of the industry. For the first time in months, she felt like herself again. The artist who painted not for the praise or the recognition, but because it was a part of her soul. Evan, understanding the need for space, continued to support her from the sidelines. He gave her the quiet, peaceful environment she needed to reconnect with her craft, never pushing her but always there when she needed him. He too had learned the value of stepping back, of not forcing something that wasn't ready. Their relationship had always been built on mutual respect, and this moment of solitude allowed Lily to rediscover that. After several weeks of creating in isolation, Lily felt ready to return to the world. She had created a new series of paintings, each piece more personal and raw than anything she had done before. The work was vulnerable, reflecting her own struggles with expectation, identity, and growth. It was, in many ways, a reflection of the internal journey she had been on since the loss of her father. When she finally shared the new series with Evan, his eyes lit up. "This is incredible, Lily. It's you. It's your soul on the canvas." For the first time in a long while, Lily felt proud of her work not because of the accolades it might receive, but because it was an honest expression of who she was. It wasn't about meeting anyone's expectations. It was about meeting her own. The new series was unveiled at a small, intimate gallery opening, far removed from the grandeur of her previous shows. She wanted this to be different, to create an experience that wasn't about spectacle, but about connection. The walls were adorned with her new paintings, and the room was filled with the soft hum of music, creating an atmosphere of reflection and quiet contemplation. As guests walked through the space, there was a palpable sense of intimacy in the air. People stood in front of each piece for longer than usual, taking in the raw emotion and vulnerability that radiated from the canvases. This wasn't just art. It was a glimpse into Lily's soul. Lily, standing beside Evan, watched as people connected with her work in ways she hadn't anticipated. She realized that by stepping away from the pressure, by allowing herself to just be, she had created something that was deeply meaningful not only to her but to others as well. As the night came to a close, Evan turned to Lily, a proud smile on his face. "You've done it. You've found your way back to yourself." Lily nodded, her heart full. "I've learned that it's okay to take a step back. It's okay to create for the love of creating, not for the expectations of others. This work, it's for me. And if others connect with it, that's just the bonus." And in that moment, as the final guests filtered out of the gallery, Lily knew she had rediscovered her passion. She had learned that sometimes the only expectation she needed to meet was her own. And with that realization, she was free to continue her journey, not for anyone else, but for herself. The weight had been lifted, and for the first time in a long time, Lily felt a deep sense of peace. The journey ahead was still uncertain, but Lily was ready to embrace it, one brushstroke, one step at a time. As the months passed since her gallery exhibition, Lily found herself once again standing at a crossroads. The pressures of her rising fame had been replaced by an internal search for purpose. While the success of her recent show had been overwhelming, she felt the quiet tug of something more. Something beyond the walls of her studio, beyond the boundaries of the art world. Evan had noticed the change in her. She was no longer just caught up in the rush of accolades and media attention. She was deeply contemplative, seeking something that she couldn't quite define. He had always admired Lily's strength and creativity, but now, it seemed, she was searching for a different kind of meaning. "Hey," he said one evening as they sat together on their balcony, the night sky stretching out above them. "You've been quiet lately. What's on your mind?" Lily took a deep breath, looking out over the city. The lights twinkled in the distance, but her mind wasn't on the beauty of the view. It was lost in the uncertainty of her future. "I've been thinking a lot about what's next," she confessed. "I've created art that's meaningful to me, and that's been amazing. But, I don't know, I just feel like I'm meant to do more. I want to make a real difference, Evan. Not just in the art world, but in people's lives. Evan turned to her, his eyes soft but knowing. I've always admired how deeply you care about people. Maybe you're meant to take your art somewhere unexpected, somewhere that can touch people in a new way. Lily's eyes lit up as if a light bulb had gone off. That's exactly it. I've always wanted my work to make a connection, but maybe there's a way to do that on a larger scale. What if my art could create real, tangible change? Help people, not just inspire them in galleries, but in their everyday lives. It was a bold thought, and one that Lily hadn't fully allowed herself to entertain before. She had always thought of her art as a personal journey, a way to express her inner world. But now, the idea of using her work as a tool for social change, a way to impact communities in need, was beginning to take hold. Over the next few weeks, Lily threw herself into this new idea. She researched artists and projects that had used art for social activism, art that served as a catalyst for change, art that spoke to issues larger than personal expression. She was drawn to stories of organizations that brought art into underserved communities, art that told the stories of marginalized voices, and installations that sparked dialogue about issues like homelessness, mental health, and social justice. One afternoon, as she sat in her studio, sketching out potential concepts, a thought struck her like a bolt of lightning. What if I could take art to places where people need it most? It wasn't just about showcasing beauty in sterile, white-walled galleries. It was about bringing art to people who needed a way to see the world differently, to see themselves in a different light. She envisioned setting up interactive art spaces in communities facing hardship. Instead of paintings hanging on walls, the installations would be immersive experiences designed to engage people, to help them reflect on their lives, their struggles, and their dreams. These installations would be more than just art. They would be healing spaces, designed to give people a voice and a sense of agency in a world that often overlooked them. Lily felt a deep sense of urgency in her vision. She wasn't just dreaming anymore. She was planning. She made calls, met with local community leaders, and sought out organizations that could help her bring her vision to life. It was going to be a massive undertaking, one that required more resources, time, and energy than she had ever imagined. But she was determined. As she dove into the logistics of the project, Lily began to understand just how much of herself she would need to invest in it. This was no longer just about creating something beautiful or impactful. It was about making a real difference in the lives of people who had been forgotten or ignored. It was about meeting them where they were, not as a distant artist, but as someone who genuinely cared. Evan was right there beside her every step of the way. Though the project required countless hours of planning, organizing, and fundraising, he never wavered in his support. He even began to volunteer with Lily, helping her organize events, reaching out to local artists who could contribute, and offering his skills as a photographer to document the entire process. He believed in what she was doing, and that made all the difference. As the project began to take shape, Lily found herself pulling from everything she had learned over the years. The heart of the installation would be built around human connection, creating environments where people could express themselves freely, where they could tell their stories and be heard. She wanted to make sure the spaces were accessible, interactive, and engaging, with a focus on collaborative creativity. Lily worked tirelessly, pulling in artists, designers, and volunteers who shared her vision. It was a monumental effort, one that stretched her limits both creatively and emotionally. But as the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, she began to see the impact of her work. Local communities were excited about the project, and people were eager to get involved. The day the first installation opened was one that Lily would never forget. The space was filled with vibrant colors, interactive displays, and elements that invited people to engage with the art in meaningful ways. It wasn't just about looking at paintings or sculptures. It was about being a part of the artwork, contributing to it, and leaving your mark. Each room was designed to spark conversation and self-reflection. From interactive murals where participants could add their own touch to digital installations that encouraged visitors to share their stories. The response from the community was overwhelming. People who had never considered themselves artists were suddenly creating, expressing, and opening up in ways they never had before. The installations gave them a voice, a space to tell their stories, and a chance to connect with others who shared similar experiences. For Lily, watching people engage with her work in this new way was transformative. She had always wanted her art to touch people, but this was something else entirely. This wasn't just inspiration. This was empowerment. It was a way for people to see their own worth and express themselves in a world that often made them feel invisible. As the success of the first installation spread, Lily knew that she was on the path she was always meant to follow. The road less traveled wasn't an easy one, but it was the one that felt truest to her heart. She wasn't just an artist anymore. She was a creator of spaces, a catalyst for change. The project would continue to grow, expanding to different communities and evolving along the way. Lily knew that her journey was far from over. There was still so much to do, so many lives to touch, so much more to give. And though the path ahead would undoubtedly come with its own set of challenges, Lily finally understood that her art had always been about more than just self-expression. It was about creating connection, about healing, and about helping others find their voice. In that realization, Lily knew that her true calling was not just to create for herself, but to create for the world. In the end, it wasn't about fame or recognition or meeting the expectations of others. It was about making an impact, about using her talents to leave a legacy of love, empathy, and change. And with Evan by her side, Lily was ready to continue down the road less traveled, knowing that this was the journey that would lead her to where she was truly meant to be. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, Lily wasn't afraid to walk it. She was finally living her truth. The sun was setting over the horizon as Lily stood in front of the latest installation, her heart swelling with a mixture of pride and reflection. The building behind her was bustling with activity, the space filled with people of all ages, cultures, and backgrounds, all interacting with the art she had created. It was no longer just about her vision. It was a collective experience, a living testament to the power of art to heal, connect, and transform. In the years since she had started this journey, Lily had seen her work evolve from personal exploration to a powerful force for community empowerment. She had watched people walk into her installations as strangers to one another and leave with a deeper understanding of themselves and their shared humanity. The impact had been far-reaching, extending into areas she had never even anticipated. Schools, hospitals, shelters, and even corporate spaces had reached out to incorporate elements of her work, all seeking to foster connection, spark conversations, and create healing spaces. Lily had taken her art to the streets, to the people who needed it most. She had brought color to communities that had long been overlooked, giving individuals the opportunity to express themselves in ways they never thought possible. And with each project, she felt as though she was learning something new about herself, about the world, and about the profound effect art could have on healing and growth. Standing there, reflecting on everything she had accomplished, Lily realized something. The pressure and the fame that had once consumed her, that she had felt she needed to live up to, had faded into the background. What remained was something far more meaningful, a legacy built on connection, compassion, and the belief that art could change lives. Evan, who had been by her side every step of the way, walked up beside her, his eyes filled with admiration. He had watched her go through moments of doubt, moments of exhaustion, and moments of overwhelming joy. He had witnessed the way her work had transformed, not just the lives of the people who experienced it, but her own life as well. "You've done it, haven't you?" he said softly, his voice filled with pride. "You've created something that will last, something that matters." Lily smiled, her gaze still fixed on the people moving through the exhibit. It was hard to believe how far she had come. From the artist who once felt lost and pressured by the world's expectations, to the woman standing before her own creations, knowing that she had found her true path. "I didn't do it alone," she replied, her voice thick with emotion. "None of this would be possible without you, without all the people who believed in this idea. It's bigger than me." Evan chuckled softly and placed a hand on her shoulder. "You made it happen, Lily. You had the vision. You had the courage to follow it, even when it felt impossible. And you've touched so many lives." Lily turned toward him, a grateful smile spreading across her face. "And I couldn't have done it without you," she said simply. As the evening went on and the last of the visitors began to leave, Lily and Evan found a quiet corner of the space to sit and reflect. The soft hum of conversations filled the air as they watched the final moments of the day unfold. It felt like the calm after a storm, peaceful, fulfilling, and full of promise. "I've learned so much over the past few years," Lily said, her voice reflective. "I've learned that art isn't just about creating something beautiful. It's about creating something that speaks to people, something that helps them understand themselves, their struggles, and their potential for growth." Evan nodded, taking her hand in his. "You've always been about more than just the art. You've always wanted to make a difference. And now, you've created something that has the power to change lives." Lily's heart swelled with gratitude. She had spent so much of her life chasing after recognition and success, only to discover that the true value of her work had never been about that at all. The most meaningful moments in her life had come when she allowed herself to simply be, when she followed her heart and created from a place of deep authenticity. In doing so, she had found the kind of success that mattered. In the years that followed, Lily's work continued to grow, touching even more lives around the world. Her installations became a movement, one that transcended borders and languages. It wasn't just about art anymore. It was about people, their voices, their experiences, and their shared humanity. It was about reminding the world that everyone had a story worth telling. As she traveled to different parts of the world, working with communities in need, she realized that the greatest gift her art could offer was not just a temporary escape or distraction from pain, but a lasting connection. Art, in its purest form, was about making people feel seen, heard, and understood. She watched as children who had never picked up a paintbrush before began to create, as homeless individuals expressed their stories through sculpture, as young adults found strength in their words and images. Each story was unique, but each one had a common thread: a desire to be understood, to be acknowledged, and to find a sense of belonging. And Lily realized that this was what her father had always tried to teach her. He had shown her that the most important thing in life was to make a difference, to love deeply, and to leave the world better than you found it. He hadn't needed to leave a grand legacy or create something that would be remembered for centuries. His legacy was in the way he lived, in the love he shared, the lessons he imparted, and the way he had shown Lily the true power of art, of connection, and of compassion. One evening, as Lily stood before another new installation, this time in a rural village in a far-off country, she felt a sense of peace wash over her. The world had become a place of endless possibility, and she had a small but significant part to play in it. Looking up at the stars, she thought about everything she had gone through, the doubts, the struggles, the moments of despair, and how it had all led her to this moment. It hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. Her art had become a bridge, a pathway to healing and understanding. It had given people the tools to express their stories, their fears, their hopes. It had made them realize that they weren't alone, that they were part of something greater, and that, she thought, was the most important thing she could offer. Her heart swelled as she thought of the future, of the countless projects that still lay ahead, of the communities yet to be reached, and of the work that would continue to evolve, growing alongside her own journey. Lily had learned that life was about more than just surviving. It was about embracing the moments of connection, the moments of creation, and the moments of change. It was about finding joy in the journey, not just the destination. And with Evan by her side, and the world at her feet, Lily was ready to continue making her mark on the world. One step, one brushstroke, and one heart at a time. Her legacy wasn't in the fame she had once sought. It was in the lives she had touched, the stories she had helped to tell, and the love she had shared. And that was enough. The road ahead was still long, but Lily knew that wherever it took her, she would always follow the path that felt truest to her heart, the path of art, of connection, and of change. And that, she knew, would be her greatest legacy. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?